Welcome back to Alex Gordon Audios and to part 11 of Imperium Ascendant, a Warhammer 40k what-if saga that reimagines the dawn of the Imperium and the first true war against chaos. In this chapter, the heart of Luna becomes a crucible where mortal courage clashes with primordial malice, where fathers and sons confront truths older than the stars, and where the price of survival is written in gold, silver, and steel. Demigods bleed, angels burn, and the foundations of mankind's destiny are forged in fire. Strap in, brothers and sisters. The long war begins now. Chapter 21. Gold, Silver, and Steel. Location: the heart of the Inner Sanctum, Luna. Date: 813. 30. 13 hours since the battle for Luna began. It was evil incarnate. That was the only way Abaddon could describe the nightmarish being before him. Nearly every human civilization had some myth or concept of the adversary. Satan, Lucifer, Apophis, Set, Erlich, Iblis, Angra Mainyu, Belakor, Baal, Azura, Nyarlathotep, and many, many more. This idea, the idea of the primordial enemy, evil given form and purpose, it had gained sentience and power within the warp. The thoughts of all of those thinking creatures had coalesced into a single being of malice and horror. It formed into the Dark Master. Now Belakor, the first damned of chaos, had entered the material universe. Empowered and given body by the creed of 4 phases, the demon prince's fanged maw split into a grin as it noticed the fallen Primarch, moving ponderously as it grew used to the rapidly fading laws of physics. It moved with an almost apathetic gait. The universe seemed to ripple and contort as it walked towards the Astartes, as if space-time itself fought to move from his infernal presence. The demon prince spoke in a deep and eloquent tone. "I had hoped to claim the 16 as my host," the creature said, with a rueful glance at the fallen hero. "He would have made a perfect body. The dark gods would never possess a mightier agent. Alas, this sorcerer will do." Shadowy warp fire coalesced around Bellacor's claws. Approaching Horus, it let out a mirthless laugh. Still, a body such as that has so many uses. Abaddon was quick to realize the monster's intent. It wished to desecrate his father's body. He would not allow the fiend to do as it pleased. To Abaddon, the honor of the entire Six-Anged Legion was at stake. Standing between Primarch and Prince, Abaddon intended to die stopping the monster. Some part of the young Astartes knew this is exactly where he belonged, standing before evil incarnate and guarding mankind's destiny. He had done so aboard the Tiber Prince, and he would continue to do so until his last breath. Belakor stood twice the height of a Primarch and peered down at the Astartes before him. "Oh, another War Master approaches me. The first failed to embrace the gods. Will you fail yet again, Despoiler?" Roaring with fury, Abaddon charged the demon prince. He knew he could not best the horror, but he could delay it. Belakor deflected the Astartes' blows with casual ease, laughing at the Space Marine's futile attempts as he did so. Soon, the other battle brothers within the chamber charged the demon as well. It laughed and summoned another blade to meet their desperate charge. Dozens of Astartes threw themselves at the monster, but Belacor shredded them to bits, dodging bolt shells and bisecting Astartes with supernatural skill the whole time. Screaming with righteous fury as another one of his brother was killed by the demon, the Redeemer fought on. Abaddon was too slow on his next parry and was sent flying with a lash of Belacor's draconian tail. Abaddon landed in a crumpled heap near his father's body. As he lay next to Horus's corpse, a faint flicker of light caught his attention. Jolts and sparks of psionic electricity emanated from the spear tip buried in Horus, faint golden energy glowing from it. Eyes locked on the spear tip, Abaddon stumbled to his feet and felt a presence brush up against his mind. His father's voice blasted through Abaddon's head at a volume akin to a thunderclap. "Take me up and strike down the evil," it commanded. "Purge this unholy demon, Abaddon the Redeemer." Slightly concussed and mad with grief, Abaddon did not even question the reality or sanity of what he was about to do. Scrambling over to the Primarch's body, he gripped the spear tip, pulling it free from his father's corpse, its psychic energy crystallizing into a longsword of purifying light. A corona of gold rippled out and through Luna. Every psychic on Terra's moon felt it and instinctively knew the source. This golden beacon called out to three in particular, the Angel, Marcus, and Caleb. It called them to the place of their siblings' death, the 11 and the 13. Primarch immediately discharged their duties to subordinates and rushed towards the lunar north. They could not reach their brother Horus through the psychic bond shared by the 20. The beacon carried a simple message to them. Something horrible had happened to the 16. Fear, desperation, and frantic worry that only the kin of the lost can feel coursed through the brothers. To the Angel of Vengeance, it simply acted as more blood in the proverbial water, helping to guide it towards the source of corruption. Abaddon the Redeemer felt his body and soul shake from the energy coursing through him. His gauntlets started to glow from the heat, and he could feel the burning power of the spear tip in his very bones. Power only a Primarch could possess coursed through him. Abaddon did not know how long he could survive such an experience, and he did not care. He simply hoped he would last long enough to avenge Horus Lupercali. Raising the blade high, Abaddon charged the demon prince. The power coursing through him caught Belacor's attention. With a wave of shadowy force, the Dark Master smashed away the horde of Astartes trying to gain his attention. Summoning a single jagged blade of tainted metal, the demon prepared to match swords with Abaddon. Faster and stronger than his body and mind had any right to be, Abaddon dueled the horror from beyond the material world, his shining sword clashing with Belacor's, letting loose a shower of sparks with each blow. Abaddon felt his body scream in protest from the exertions he was placing upon it. Muscle ripped and bone cracked, psychic light healing the injuries as quickly as they came. Abaddon was faster and stronger than ever before. But even with his new powers, he was barely fit to trade blows with Belacor. The demon prince laughed maniacally as its blade flashed a mesmerizing pattern of murder. The monster seemed to be enjoying the duel. The battle brothers of the 16 fought at Abaddon's side, hoping to distract the demon even a bit. Even fighting dozens of Astartes and the empowered Abaddon, Be'lakor was holding his own. Seeing no other options, the 16 Astartes had all activated the Legion's unique 24th organ. It was an augment to their revitalizer gland, a gift from their Primarch to his sons. In moments of extreme stress, a flood of neuroenhancers and pseudo-organic war chems explode from the gland, allowing the Astartes to think, move, and react faster than should be physically possible. Combining this gift with the latent psionic blessing each Astartes possessed resulted in short bursts of incredible power. It was a secret weapon reserved for the most dire of moments. If there was ever a time for such a thing, it was now. Supercharged by the spear tip's psychic effects and his father's biological gift, the elite of Horus's sons fought at a level unmatched by any other Astartes in all 20 legions, desperate to avenge their fallen and send the fiend screaming back to the abyss. To the Astartes, time seemed to stand still, and incomparable power coursed through them. To the demon prince, this was just further entertainment. Unknown to all but Be'lakor, another threat hid within the chamber. Cloaked in etheric shadows, the monster once known as Argel Tal stalked. Korban, the Eversacrifice, clambered along the demonic cathedral ceiling, careful to avoid the battle down below. The possessed champion dropped down to the warp rift, scanning for what he needed to complete his mission. Hidden from the Astartes, Korban claimed his objective. The twin artifacts of Luna, namely the obsidian knife, still caked in Zamora's blood, and the chalice Sagittari 17 had drained to become the demon's host. Plucking them from the warp-tainted stone, Korban retreated into the shadows. His minions had escaped through the warp rift, and he would in time. For now, the gods still required him on Luna. Be'lakor felt the Eversacrifice complete his mission and let out a snort of annoyance. Another rival for the gods' attention was never welcome. Even if they were forced to work together, the Dark Master felt contempt and hatred for all others who curried the undivided attention of the unholy patrons. The duel between the elite of the 16 Legion and Be'lakor continued unabated. The Astartes had yet to land a single blow on the monster, only distracting his blade. Every few minutes, a battle brother would falter. Through bad luck, exhaustion of the 24th organ, or simply not matching the demon prince, they would fall. The lucky ones were left broken, the unlucky ones died, and were spiritually devoured by the monster. Still, the Astartes held. Abaddon knew at this point he could not slay Be'lakor, and he knew his only hope was to delay until someone who could arrived. Location: the heart of the Inner Sanctum, Luna. Date: 814. 124 Terran minutes since the duel started. Everything was pain. Abaddon felt like he was being ripped apart. Mind, body, and soul pushed past any sane limit, and all were failing him. Even as his battle brothers were cut down, he fought on. For over 2 hours, Abaddon had fought with valor against the demon, matching its world-breaking blows each time it sought to end his life. By the 17th minute, he stood alone. All his fellow Astartes lay dead or dying around him. Even as sanity and rationality left him, carried away by pain, Abaddon knew the responsibility that was now his. He and he alone stood between the demon and its goals. A sudden shift rippled through the tainted chamber. Something grabbed the attention of the demon prince. Belacor sensed the twin forces making their way towards the chamber. Marcus Augustio and his sons were traveling the route Horus had taken. Caleb, in turn, lead the 11 through the opposite entrance, the one consecrated to the Dark Prince. The Demon Prince could feel the 11 Primarchs, dueling the Keeper of Secrets, bound to that gate. They would be here soon, and the true battle would start. Amusing as this spar is, your betters have come. I shall finish this distraction before devouring more of the anathema's spawn, growled Belacor. Moving at speeds, the Materium struggled to translate. Belacor lashed out at Abaddon. Lunging forward, Belacor sought to rip Abaddon's head from his shoulders. Bracing for the traumatic impact, Abaddon used the Sword of Longinus as a pike, letting the demon's momentum impale its taloned hand on the shining blade. Pulling back, Belacor looked at its hand. The great sword of psychic fire was stuck through his palm. Golden flames licked at Bellacor's hand and seared his flesh. The demon prince examined it with an expression of amused surprise on his face. A potent weapon, wielded by weak children, an apt metaphor for the power you and your father possess. Abaddon and Horus, both weak fools, undeserving of divine anointment. With a disdainful blow from the demon, Abaddon crumpled. Separated from the Spear of Destiny, his body was rapidly collapsing. Belacor wrapped his tail around the dying Astartes. Lifting Abaddon up to face level, with the blade still burning in his hand, the demon prince presented a single claw while speaking. The power you used was not yours to wield. It is a borrowed spark of a failed demigod, not enough to harm me, but it will scar me. A considerable achievement, mortal. I shall return the favor to both father and son. Slowly and methodically, Belacor sunk his talon into Abaddon's left eye, puncturing and burning away the Astartes' vision. Abaddon could not even scream, his body so damaged that a rasping gasp was all he could manage. Inky black flames scoured the flesh down to the bone, the warp energy taking its time to burn away his nerves. When a blackened socket of bone was all that remained of the eye, Belacor let Abaddon crumple to the ground. The Redeemer could only watch as the demon prince turned its attention to Horus. With an ugly kick, Belacor moved the Primarch's fallen body over, peering down at the rictus of pain that soured the demigod's handsome features. Belacor pulled the blade from his hand, gritting his fangs in pain at the act. True to his word, a silver scar soon formed where the blade had punctured the demon. Putting one massive foot on the Primarch's chest, Belacor brought the Spear of Destiny down, driving its point into the right eye of Horus with a sickening squelch. The psychic crystal that encased it shattered as he drove it in. Soon, The only piece left was a shard of ancient metal impaled his socket. Laughing at his own twisted joke, Be'lakor summoned his demonic blades and prepared to butcher the Emperor's sons. On cue, the 11 and Thanin burst from opposing sides of the chamber. The sight of the rift and its dark influence were barely noticed by the two. What caught and held their attention was the defiled corpse of Horus Lupercali. The Sixth-Essene Primarch lay at Be'lakor's feet. The demon's posture over their brother's corpse was equal parts taunt, challenge, and proclamation of malice. Caleb was faster in recovering. Like the angel of death he was, the 11 charged the demon prince. With power axe and crossbolter drawn, Primarch, who was fast earning the name Keeper of Souls, rushed forward, intent on breaking this monster. Whispering incantations of smiting, silver flames erupted along the Primarch's weapons, and wards shimmered into being around him. He was meant to guard mankind against horrors like this. He would die screaming if it was the last thing the Primarch did. Marcus took longer to process the tragedy before him. He understood it and had a fairly accurate estimate of events. Even so, he did not want to believe his brother was dead. So when that terrible, terrible truth thundered through his mind, something snapped. The calm and collected aristocratic Thi howled in bloody rage. His noble features twisted into a grimace of pain and fury. With Gladius aloft, he joined his brother. The demon prince crossed blades with both Primarchs, easily dueling both champions of humanity. When he dueled Abaddon, he had been sparring, enjoying the thrill of the fight. This would be the true battle, one that would take all of his terrible power to win. In the hell domain that made up Luna's core, Be'lakor was incredibly mighty. With a powerful host and a glut of warp power to fuel him, these false godlings stood no chance. I am Be'lakor, the dark master of the warp, first and true prince of chaos. You shall die by my hand and join the trillions who I have devoured, proclaimed the monster. The Primarchs did not respond. Killing the demon was all they could focus on. The duel took place in both material and immaterial. Blades locked as wills clashed. Telekinetic lighting and dark curses swirled through the chamber. Two sons of the light against the first son of darkness. The legionaries of the 11 and Thwathinthi knew this was not battle for them. Instead, they hurried to assist the 6 Astartes. Most were dead, but some still clung to life. Apothecaries conducted triage as they dragged the fallen away from the battle. Beacons were activated and distress calls were sent. The clash of the Titans was not their battle, but they still had a war to win. Abaddon still clung to some semblance of consciousness, the last embers of borrowed power coursing through his ruined body. Those flickers blessed him with a momentary glimpse past the veil. For a split second, Abaddon Redeemer saw Korban the Eversacrifice leaving the chamber under a cloak of shadow. He tried to warn his tending cousins of the Twontheed of the danger, but his slurried and broken speech came off as maddened rambling. Neuronic misfires, brought on by traumatic damage, would not let him give the information to his comrades. Panic filled Abaddon's mind as the drugs entering his system forced him into Suzanne coma, and soon the only thing that Abaddon would be seeing would be the inky blackness of a deep sleep. The duel between the demigods raged on. Blessed silver bolts shredded Bellacor's wings, and in return, Caleb was racked by dark talons. The Primarchs fought hard, and few beings in the entire cosmos could withstand dueling the two. Unfortunately, Be'lakor numbered in that handful. The Primarchs were young and inexperienced beings, not yet tempered by millennia of experience. This and the madness of grief slowly but surely turned the battle in Be'lakor's favor. The demon prince was thoroughly enjoying himself, and it was only a matter of time until he claimed the 11 and 13. Almost as a response to the monster's glee, a shockwave of golden energy erupted across the solar system, passing through Luna and the rest of the system. It burned the demon prince and knocked it back. It and countless of its kin across the solar war zone felt a dreaded presence and whispered its name. Anathema. Location: the Bucephalus. Date: 814. 30. 2:10 Terran minutes since the duel began. Far above Terra's moon, the Bucephalus let loose a final devastating broadside, smashing the last bits of false life from the Hashad hulk that the flagship dueled. In turn, the Emperor of Mankind had broken the unborn god and now cast its withering existence into the pit. The horror of infernal industry known as Hashad howled in impotence as the Master of Mankind proclaimed their doom across the warp. I wield the light of sanity. I am the Lord of the real. I name you for what you are, an infernal lie that feeds of misery and pain. Begone from this plane, never to return. Unhampered by the god, whose number is 4, the power of the Emperor shone across the solar system. The Emperor of Mankind felt all that had occurred, and a storm of fury boiled within him. The primordial annihilator had stolen a son from him. It had struck down Horus through sins that were not his to own or answer to. Malcador had unleashed the angel, and Luna teetered on the brink of damnation. Neither he nor the Throne Emperor was infallible, but the damage done was massive. It was thankfully not as much as it could have been, but still terrible in its destruction. Turning his thoughts to Horus, he attached a message to his sons on Luna. It rode the wave of golden power unleashed by his victory over Hashad. In it, an ember of hope flew, a possibility to change history once again and save the Primarchs. The Spear of Destiny had been involved with a miracle once before. It could, once again. Location: the heart of the Inner Sanctum, Luna. Date: 814. 30. 2:14 Terran minutes since the duel started. The Emperor's message rattled through Caleb and Marcus's minds. Recover your brother, his legion, the spear, and evacuate immediately. An experimental weapon is to be unleashed. Momentary doubt flickered through the superhuman minds of the Primarchs. Their father had seemingly sent Horus to his death. That doubt was quickly washed away by the content of the message, for the Emperor had a plan. The master of mankind was always ahead of his enemies, even if they were the dark gods. The message had shaken both Be'lakor and the Primarchs, resetting the flow of battle. The pause did not last long. A vicious roar escaped Be'lakor as he charged the Primarchs once again. The two young demigods struggled to parry the blows, not because of any failure in their training or in their spirit. They were just simply outclassed by the first Prince of Chaos. Even with the knowledge that they could not win this fight, they continued the struggle, telepathically relaying orders and information to their legions all the while. The still-living elite of the 60 were ferried out of the chamber and towards evac points. The dead were harvested and marked with runes of warding. A troop of pallbearers from both 11 and 19 legions attempted to move Horus Lupercali, but crackling psionic residue coating the fallen Primarch and his considerable bulk hampered this effort. As duel continued, a series of emergency Vox transmission crackled into the Primarch's armor. The Legion fleets spotted something moving at incredible speeds headed for the lunar North Pole. Auspex readings were off the charts, and any psychic probes they sent towards the object had produced bizarre results. Whatever weapon the Emperor had unleashed was coming in fast. To the fleet, it appeared like a flaming meteor, somehow defying the laws of physics by lighting a trail of psychic destruction across the hard vacuum of Lunar's surface. Despite lacking any conventional or detectable thrust system, the object, which was smaller than a drop pod, was moving at velocities an Imperial destroyer would be pressed to match. A crew member on board an 13 Legion escort craft watched its path as she manned one of the ship's flak turrets. By sheer luck, she was closest to the fireball and had an impressive view of the object. The gunner would swear for the rest of her days that whatever she saw, it had wings. The comet suddenly changed direction, diving straight towards the lunar surface. Frantic orders from Terra prevented it from being fired upon, with the Imperial fleet watching apprehensively as it struck Moon. Instead of a massive cloud of ash erupting from a tremendous impact, it seemed to pierce right through the lunar bedrock. An arrow of light and fire set loose from the Emperor's vaults. The impact could still be felt from within the Inner Sanctum. A high-pitched hum seemed to resonate through the entire Moon as it bore through the satellite. The Primarchs attempted to disengage from the duel, but were stopped by the fury of their opponents' blades. Any weakness or misstep would lead to catastrophic injury. The noise only increased, and the temperature within the chamber started to climb. Orders were given, the Astartes evacuated, leaving the body of Horus. It would be up to the fallen Primarch's siblings to remove him. Marcus silently hoped that they could survive whatever was coming. A quick glance at his brother told him that they were both beginning to have serious doubts about this conflict. The belief of invincibility and immortality that naturally came with youth and supernatural power was rapidly fading from both of the Primarchs. Then finally, after what seemed like a seeming eternity, judgment came. Like a boring drill made of solid flame, the angel burned through the bedrock and smashed through the ceiling, exploding into the chamber in a corona of psychic fire. It had burned a straight hole to the sanctum, scorching away stone, steel, and the dark god's touch. The corrupted stone and steel composing the inner sanctum recoiled from it, the angel's fire searing away at the warp's influence. It was a pure and terrible shard of the anathema, the thing that chaos feared above all else. All three combatants stopped the duel as it crashed through the ceiling. Impotent rage and a twinge of fear radiated from Be'lakor, while the Primarchs were more shocked than anything. Before them stood a woman made of fire. It radiated an aura of order, domination, and destruction they had only felt one other place. This illuminating shadow of their father was a lesser and far more terrible thing of the Emperor. It was all the fire and fury of mankind's protector, stripped of its compassion and humanity. Yet on some hidden, buried level, the two Primarchs felt something disturbingly similar. A spark of power and majesty only felt when in the presence of kin. This weapon, it was a Primarch, but not a Primarch. The angel looked upon the Primarchs and spoke in a voice of legions. "Take the Sisk scene and leave. My flames shall purge the unclean." Without another word, it turned to Be'lakor. A blade of blue flames materialized within its hand. The demon prince smiled a wicked grin and prepared to face its first true challenge in eons. Before him was the anathema's scion. It would die by his claw. Frantically, Caleb and Marcus rushed over to Horus and hoisted his body up, his noble arms draped over each of their shoulders. Ignoring the sparking pain of psychic shock and the burning heat of the angel, the brothers bolted from the chamber. This was not a battle for them. They were like ancient myth heroes stuck between clashing titans. Heracles, half-god, and Perseus, Argos maker, were mighty figures, but nothing compared to the wrath of Tartares or Urano. Such was the difference between young Primarchs and ancient demon kings. One day, that would not be the case, but for now, they would have to take comfort in the knowledge that survival was their key objective. As the three Primarchs left the chamber, the angel and Be'lakor faced each other, black and gold flames crackling around them as the fabric of the room buckled under the weight of the psychic power present in the chamber. Both combatants watched for weakness, slowly circling the sanctum like dueling apex predators. At some unknown signal, the angel and demon charged. Like colliding planetoids, they locked blades, unleashing a shockwave of psychokinetic force that detonated with a thunderous boom, which shook the inner sanctum and cracked its stone structure. In the cathedral-sized sanctum, they clashed. To mortal eyes, it would appear like twin stars colliding, one of inhuman heat and power, the other of oily demonic chill. Be'lakor was capable of wielding more power in the materium in eons. The first prince was a mass of sheer evil, a thing of doom and damnation. The angel was worse. It was a thing of undiluted domination. Raw power barely directed by the Emperor's will. Be'lakor spat curses and profane insults with every strike. Grim silence was the angel's only answer. Just as their physical bodies dueled, the monsters fought spiritually. Chaotic and anathemic energies were unleashed, distorting and destroying the sanctum in a never-ending cycle. Flying through the rapidly crumbling sanctum, the angel hacked away at Be'lakor's guard, each blow a thing of blessed steel, holy flames, and divine fury. The demon prince was puzzled by what he fought. Its existence was an unknown, some terrible tool the anathema had kept locked away. Belacor could feel that this angel had more in common with him than any human. It was a blasphemy to everything the so-called emperor believed in, something that should have been hidden away in shame. For it to be unleashed was truly interesting. With serpentine whispers, the demon plied these questions, hungering for forbidden answers and an advantage in the duel. Belacor had thought himself invincible, for the amount of worship and warp stuff pouring through him had made it to where not even a Primarch could stand against him. The angel seemed intent on proving him wrong. It moved at speeds he barely registered, and its swordsmanship was flawless. Its power matched Belacor in every way. Empowered by some unknown source, it grew hotter and hotter to counteract the rising tide of evil known as Belacor. With the souls of the creed glutting him and the power of the rift, the demon prince only grew in might. Like a dynamo of psychic energy, the angel only grew stronger, its flames expanding, filling the sanctum, scouring away the warp taint and melting the steel and stone into metal-veined obsidian. It was like fighting a star, a force of nature. The angel was practically divorced from human characteristics. Order, pure and dominating order, given flesh. The angel's body was not immune to its power, being burned to ash and rebuilt to perfection simultaneously. Normally, defeat in the material world meant banishment and castigation, annoyances, but only setbacks. For an ancient and impossibly powerful demon prince like Belacor, true death was a near impossibility. As the angel fire seared his soul, he started to worry if this anathema shard could render him into unbeing. Growling in fury, Belacor channeled all its might into breaking this foe. His power bloomed like a black hole, growing to devour a world. The entirety of Luna shook with each blow. Thousands of gigatons of imaginary energy distorted space-time and ripped continent-length fissures through the moon. Twin gods, one of unbending order and another of eternal chaos, dueled, and the universe trembled. Location: near Luna's core. Date: 8/1/15, 30, 41 minutes since the angel's arrival. After escaping the chamber, the Primarchs desperately sent orders for a mass evacuation across the Vox channels on Luna. The pacification of the moon was dying down, and only a few heavily entrenched holdouts of cultists remained. These traitors cheered the dark gods as they saw the Astartes and Auxilia retreat, not knowing the source of this temporary salvation came from their god's antithesis. Loyalist forces and civilians were herded into massive landing craft. A thunderous migration of millions surged towards the lunar surface, hoping to reach the Astartes' evacuation points. With void control, the entire landing power of 3 legions could be put to use. Marcus and Caleb hauled their brother's body through the winding catacombs within Luna. Both superhumans using telepathic and Vox communication to coordinate the diaspora towards the lunar surface. Every few seconds, another detonation from the core would echo through the satellite, buffeting the Primarchs and sending some of their guards stumbling. The Emperor had unleashed something incredibly powerful, and Caleb silently hoped this thing could be locked away again once everything was over. Relays from the rest of the system were looking excellent, however. The enemy fleets had been largely composed of demonically infested hulk ships, millions of years of burned-out cosmic refuse ejected from the warp by petulant gods. Compared to the full imperial might commanded by the Primarchs, it was insignificant. The element of surprise and their numbers had been the only advantages possessed. New heroes were baptized in void combat, and the start of 1,000 legends across the 20 legions started. The huddled masses of the solar system had watched the forces of evil come. They had heard the maddened broadcasts howling for death and damnation. Humanity's cradle had shuddered with fear and revulsion as the horrors of old night came calling. Those terrified, huddled masses had expected the terrible scene of chaotic and xeno-marauders violating entire worlds to come once again. Instead, legions of light marched forth to meet this great enemy. Millions of champions reborn through human mastery of the cosmos had stood between them and the darkness. The Emperor had dueled a false god and broke it upon the anvil of war. His sons had rallied the mightiest armed force in Sol since the near-forgotten days of the Iron War. The light of salvation had come. Suddenly, as if a switch was flipped, a new understanding blossomed in the infant Imperium. The age of strife was over. The human soul would not be extinguished. No, it would instead burn bright with the light of the Emperor. He was not just the master of mankind, but the herald of its salvation. The same fervor that pumped through him and his sons filled them as well. The time to run and hide was over. Now it was time to stand and fight. To the Primarchs within Luna, such grand sentiments escaped them. Grief filled their hearts, and a desperate drive to survive propelled them. The fate of Horus had been hidden from the greater part of the legions so far. Such a crippling blow to morale could not be allowed at such a crucial time. As they fled the calamitous battle raging within Luna, the psionic fire could still be felt, a faint heat that could be detected by all within range. No matter when they were, the sensation of a distant inferno could be felt coming from the core. Psychic feedback rippling through the immaterium picked up by countless souls. Marcus and Caleb could only flee and hope to follow the Emperor's orders. The Primarchs, the body of Horus, and their respective honor guards made a strange sight marching through the tunnels. Unknown to them, a hidden agent of chaos had joined this odd caravan. Hiding in the meniscus between the materium and immaterium was Korban the Eversacrifice. Hidden from the distracted sixth sight of the Primarchs, the demon host had stalked them since they exited the Inner Sanctum, searching for a moment of weakness to strike. It came when a truly cataclysmic impact shook the moon. Crevices large enough to swallow a man erupted throughout the tunnel, which caused the Primarchs to completely stop in their tracks. The quake combined with an eruption of psychic energy buffeted them. At that moment, with all their senses distracted, the Eversacrifice struck. Like some nocturnal fiend, Korban materialized from the shadows. In one taloned hand was an obsidian blade of sacrifice, and in the other, a bloody goblet. Supercharged by the blessings of chaos, and striking at a moment of distracted weakness, Korban ripped the cursed dagger across the chests of both Marcus and Horus. The empowered volcanic glass ripped through the auramite armor and raked the Primarch's flesh. Exhausted from dueling Belcar, Marcus lacked the focus to erect a kind shield or some similar defense fast enough. A splatter of demigod ichor leaped through the air, propelled by the blade's edge, like paint dripping from a brush. A few drops from 2 possible arch-traitors were stolen into the goblet, with both artifacts anointed in the Primarch's blood. Korban attempted to flee. In a single fluid motion, he collected the blood and slashed the dagger across space/time, ripping open a gaping wound into the warp. Chanting black prayers to the dark gods, Korban leaped through the rift in reality, hoping to escape with this newly born Athame dagger. Despite all his gifts, Korban was only a mutated and damned Astartes, not a being capable of harming a Primarch without paying a bloody price. An edge of blessed adamant silver cleaved through Korban. Calib Krad, the 11th Primarch, had brought his war axe down on the Eversacrifice's midriff, ripping through tainted ceramite, muscle, and bone. With a blow that held the precision of a surgeon's scalpel and the might of an artillery barrage, Korban was broke in half. Vomiting blood and ichor, the Eversacrifice howled in agony as he fell through the portal. His lower half was separated from him, and his internal organs were burning in a caustic reaction from the thrice-blessed silver. Crippled and in intense pain, Korban, the Eversacrifice, tumbled into the warp, still clutching the artifacts. With a shudder, the rift shut behind the fleeing demon host, damning him to tumble through the hell currents of the warp in a crippled state until the fickle whims of the dark gods found it appropriate to release him back into the materium. The wounds he had inflicted were neither deep nor cursed, just powerful enough to shed a Primarch's blood. Loath to guess at the reason or nature of this bizarre occurrence, the Primarchs continued their mission onwards. They would get their answers eventually, but the threat was dealt with for the time being. Marcus Augustio waved his shocked guards away and continued onwards. Escaping the calamity at Luna's core took all precedent. Location: a cavern of molten steel and rock that had once been the inner sanctum of the Creed. Date: 8/15. 30. 191 minutes since the angel's arrival. Battling a demon is never an easy thing. The Neverborn are not things of meat or metal. One cannot simply destroy an integral system and watch its body fail. A demon is a mass of sentient or semi-sentient warp energy puppeteering material matter. To banish it back to its hell dimension home, it must be forced from the matter it is controlling, either by utterly destroying the host or sapping its energy through wards, exorcism, and similar rites. The tools used to banish demons often use a mix of these factors. The Warhammer itself destroys the tissue and circuits, while the symbolism of the Hammer of Witches drives out the corrupting warp energy. So when a demon is damaged, it is not being truly hurt, only cast back into the pit. Within the warp where banishment is not possible, battles play out differently. Instead of destroying an enemy demon, a part or even all of it will be consumed. Cannibalism and predation between and within each god's sphere of influence are very common. Demons wax, wane, and change sides with the shifting battle lines of the warp. Such is the great game, where flux is eternal and possibilities are infinite, and certainty, such as death, is alien. True and permanent death is a rare thing indeed. Killing a demon requires wiping two from the warp itself in such a way that its energy does not rejoin the great game, but simply ceases to be. The most primitive way to do this is for a far more powerful or uniquely antagonistic warp power to utterly reduce the demon from being. Much like how a star can burn entire worlds into nothing but its most basic component atoms, a stark contrast to the cannibalistic exchange common between demons. The only power in the Immaterium with the will and means to do this is the anathema. Atham the Revelator is not a participant in the great game. He is its end. He is feared and reviled by the warp predators that feed upon the Materium and each other. When it came to matters involving the anathema, nothing was held back. Both sides fought to exterminate the other. This near-eternal conflict continued in truly cataclysmic terms within Luna. The first demon prince and the first angel of death sought to destroy each other. Phenomenal psychic power, swords, and minds clashed in novas of power. The angel's flesh was marred by many oily scars that oozed corruption, as was Be'lakor with tongues of blue flame that refused to be extinguished. The core of Luna WWS being superheated and cooled by clashing energies in a physics-defying battle. The only constant in the ever-shifting battlefield was the rift. The crack, in reality, provided a peephole for the gods to watch the battle. Its jagged edges spat incandescent lighting, illuminating the war zone in impossible colors. A particularly brutal clash had sent both angel and demon colliding into opposite ends of the chamber. The steel-shredding impact barely phased the two. Scrabbling from the impact craters, they flew across the chamber. Reaching supersonic speeds, they smashed into each other, their weapons screaming for death of their opponent. With a mid-air feint, Be'lakor spun and grabbed one of the angel's wings and threw her into the chamber wall. A flurry of doom bolts and curses followed the reeling avatar of sanity, and before she could recover, all two stories of Be'lakor landed on top of her wounded form. A taloned claw gripped the angel's head and dragged her along the obsidian wall, grinding her burning flesh against the stone as he flew along it. Suddenly, gouts of flames erupted from the angel, searing the warp-infused flesh of Be'lakor. The Dark Prince was forced to let go of his foe, providing an opportunity for the angel to ram her flaming greatsword through the demon's gut, the psychic flames burning away twisted flesh. Roaring in fury, Be'lakor punched the angel. The atmosphere detonated in a cavitation bubble tinged with demonic laughter. Floating back to her feet, the angel flew forwards and gripped her blade's hilt. With a brutal upward stroke, she pulled it free and through the demon's mutant ribcage. Be'lakor growled through the pain and summoned dark powers to combat the golden flames searing his flesh. The battle continued for hours, neither side capable of gaining an advantage. Their flesh and spirit healed as quick as they were damaged, but Be'lakor could draw the fetid spring of corruption that was the rift within Luna, and he knew that he would tire slower than his foe. A scrap of the soul once known as Sagittarius 17 was entrapped in his stolen flesh, tormented and mocked by the demon he had once served. He had believed himself chosen, elected by the divine, a rightful sorcerer lord to enact the gods' will. Be'lakor had lost count of the times he had claimed such fools as hosts. Across the galaxy and the ages, 1,000 worlds had gone mad under the first prince's whims, each tragedy ending with the warp-touched architects of extinction becoming his hosts and playthings. Sagittari 17 was just the next of this chaotic epic. What puzzled Be'lakor was the source of the angel's power. He could sense the Astronomicon helping stabilize it, but it was not its font of energy. While it was similar to an incarnated demon, flesh infused with warp energy, it was also decidedly different. Something unique and bizarre made it up. Similar to the Primarchs in some ways, but if they had a spark of it inside of them, this thing was a blazing inferno. The angel and the Primarchs were indeed warp-touched, in a way that was both experimentally new and impossibly ancient. The anathema had crafted his tools of domination perfectly. The duel continued unabated, with Be'lakor holding a slight advantage in power, not enough to tip the balance decisively, but enough that he would eventually win. With the warp rift feeding him the raw stuff of chaos and the laws of physics fading in Luna, victory would be his. This tempo changed in a single moment. With a perfectly timed parry, the angel had slashed its sword across the 8-sided rune on the demon's chest. The psychic flames that formed the sword leapt onto his flesh and sought to reduce him to ash, instead of slowly fading to auric cinders that would be quenched by his ocean of malice. These flames only grew hotter, burning away at the demon's flesh. The angel's fire spread, leaping from its form like solar flares. Everything it touched burned. The warp's touch was burned out of the materium, purged with callous disregard. The angel's power was growing, and quickly. Soon, a corona of energy surrounded her. The angel had become a star. It took Be'lakor no time to realize the source of this new power. The Emperor of mankind had come to Luna, where the Primarchs were power placed in flesh and filtered through a human soul. The angel was nothing but unstoppable psychic energy, barely contained in a saint's body. It existed only to destroy what the Emperor decreed an enemy. Eventually, if left unchained for too long, it would stop limiting itself. It would seek to serve the Emperor the only way it could, by destroying anything and everything it deemed unworthy or corrupt. It was a being made of pure order and domination, and few would escape its zealous judgment. So, where Be'lakor was limited by the materium's stifling certainty, the angel could only follow orders and do as the Emperor commanded. The Master of Mankind, through Malcador, had ordered it to stop Be'lakor, cleanse Luna, and protect the untainted. It had followed these orders, and even now its fire coursed through the lunar catacombs, burning out the chaotic corruption like a virus culled from a bloodstream. Now the Emperor's attention and will was focused through the angel. Instead of a broken godling, Be'lakor faced the anathema himself. Using the angel, much like a normal psyker would a force weapon, The Emperor channeled his power through her and unleashed his fury. Blow after blow burned and broke Be'lakor. His flesh was seared and his soul ravaged. With each world-ending strike, Be'lakor was further broken. The mighty black wings that had once darkened the skies of countless worlds were ragged stumps. His limbs were torn off and burned. As the core of Luna burned with golden light, the Emperor Angel gripped the demon by its throat and dragged it to the rift. Speaking through the angel, the Emperor addressed the demon prince and his gods. "You are not gods. You are nothing but a disease, a blight on the soul of mankind, a curse inflicted in the first war. I will cleanse the warp of you and bring light and sanity to my people. Your armies have been broken. Hashad has been cast back to its pit. The Imperium has been girded against your taint. The laughter of thirsting gods is over. The age of false gods is at an end. The age of mankind has begun." Thrusting Be'lakor through the rift, the Emperor started to pour the psychic energy that made up the angel into the warp. The angel was an unborn Primarch. It was divine essence, not given humanity, but simply weaponized. Now that anathema power was being poured directly into the warp, he sacrificed the angel very essence to inject his will into the deepest realms of chaos. Screaming in unimaginable pain and humiliation, Be'lakor fled for its false life, leaving the body of Sagittari 17 and seeking some dark pit to hide in. Still, the angel bled into the warp. The gods screamed in horror and frantically sought to stop the poisoning. The warp rift in Luna had been opened from the darkest reaches of the warp, the domain of chaos itself. Here, they could twist existence and send the sons of Lorgar back in time. Here, the God Emperor could not destroy the gate, only shut it. It was a breach in existence leading to the stronghold of chaos, a place of great darkness, a place of power, where chaos was at its purest, unassailable and invincible. Except for one thing, for the deeper the darkness, the brighter the light shines. The angel's essence flooded into the heart of chaos. The Emperor would never have been able to strike such a domain normally. The gods had opened the way, channeling their might to extinguish the Imperium. Instead, the light of salvation and revelation struck the gods. The light burned away at each realm of chaos, exposing weaknesses in each domain and opening new cracks in the strongholds of disorder. The Chaos Gods felt the old rules of the game change. The anathema had cast a light in the deepest darkness, and the gods were afraid. Fear and desperation make fools of all of us, and in that moment of panic, great cracks in the alliance known as Chaos Undivided were illuminated. The Emperor still held the attention of the Four, but more of it was cast to their siblings. Opportunities became apparent, as did flaws. The threat of the anathema had not lessened, but the danger of a rival ruinous power had only increased. The gods would be at war, stuck dueling each other while keeping an eye upon the Emperor. Self-destruction is chaos's very nature, and when an opportunity presented itself, the Four could not help themselves. Somewhere within the warp, an outcast watched this display and laughed. This misguided malice would aid the Emperor, and itself rise to join the game. Reeling in horror, the four frantically to utterly shut the rift. As space-time convulsed and the warp's power subsided, the angel pulled itself out of the rift, still holding the burnt and broken husk that had once been Sagittarius 17. As a final parting gift of spite, the four spat an ember of evil into the failed servant. The last bits of the cult leader's soul took control of his broken body, just as it mutated into a rancid chaos spawn. Feeling the angel dying, the Emperor used the unborn Primarch for one final miracle. From its burnt body, a wave of golden flame lashed out, pure anathema to chaos in the form of cleansing fire coursed through Luna, burning away any lingering touches of the gods. Psychic engines and ritual chambers detonated in flames, both real and immaterial. Cultists and demonic infestations became ash. Unlucky loyalists who had failed to reach the untainted surface layers of Luna were scoured. The ones who survived would suffer the symptoms of soul binding, unconnected to the choirs, but damaged, and left in awe at the terrible might unleashed. Now, within the burning cavern, once home to the Inner Sanctum, lies two beings, radically different, yet incredibly similar. An ashen angel composed of the last few flickers of power and a mewling warp spawn that cried bitter tears at its foolishness. The Primarchs and most of the lunar loyalists had made it to the surface, where the corruption had already been scorched away by the 11 Legion's exorcist specialists. Marcus Augustio and Caleb Crad, still carrying the body of Horus, arrived into the light of Sol just as a golden stormbird touched down. When its gantry lowered, it seemed like a second sun had erupted. The Emperor had arrived on Luna. Location: the surface of Luna. Date: 8/15/30. Flanked by his custodies, the master of mankind walked upon the lunar sands. He met his sons and subjects in the fortress of Kepler Crater, the very fortress claimed by the 13 Legion at start of the Lunar Crusade. To Marcus, that felt like a lifetime ago. So much had changed in the frantic days to retake Luna. A Primarch lay dead. The warp's malice had been laid bare. The three sons of the Emperor staggered forward, the living and the dead. An awful silence filled the lunar void. Slowly, the Emperor approached the body of Horus, cupping the handsome face of his fallen son and touching the spike of ancient iron sticking from his eye. Visible tension seemed to fall off the Emperor. Unlike a mortal's mere body language, this was communicated by a semi-visible wave of esoteric energy rippling from him. Placing his hands on a shoulder of each living son, he spoke. "Horus is dead, but not beyond my reach. You two did well in saving him. There were mistakes made today, ones I will spend millennia rectifying. Trusting you, Caleb and Marcus, was not one of them. The custodes will take Horus to my sanctum. The battle is over. Finish your duties and rest. It is well earned, my sons." Tears poured down the Primarchs' faces. The desperate madness of war started to leave them as well. They had won. The Imperium had survived the Chaos God's opening salvo. The Emperor rekindled the spark of hope within them. After a brief embrace and a few parting words, Marcus and Caleb left to take command of their respective legions. efforts to sanctify and rebuild Luna would require the 11 and the Wesentinin. At the Emperor's command, Horus was rushed to the Bucephalus and placed in a stasis chamber, awaiting the attention of mankind's oldest and greatest mind. That and other matters would occupy the Emperor, but for now, he must finish the Lunar War. With Valdor and a squad of companions flanking him, the Emperor entered Luna. Following the path his sons had taken to escape the duel of false gods, the Moon of Terror had been scarred by the conflict. That was becoming evident as the transcendent sense of revelation focused on Luna. The cancer of warp taint had been violently removed. Entire cities that the Creed of Four Phases once ruled were reduced to ash and slag. The silicate nature of the moon had saved the satellite from being shattered. The titanomachy blows had cracked it and ripped open country-sized fissures across the pockmarked surface, swallowing entire cities and ancient structures like a ravenous giant. Then angel fire had spread across Luna. Psychic flames hot enough to burn the soul had traced the paths of chaos corruption like natural flames would a Prometheum trail, melting lunar dust into massive sheets of milky grey obsidian, adding celestial burn marks to accompany the battle scars and craters dotting Luna. It would take 1,000 years and a great many resources to restore the moon. The Emperor had no such desire, and if he had his way, the moon would remain in its damaged state for the rest of time. Sometimes, the most efficient way to ensure a change in human development is to burn it into the species' collective consciousness. Even now, the master of mankind could feel fate shifting, that the word lunar and even moon would be forever associated with the dangers of chaos. Humanity would only need to look to its cradle world sky to receive a bitter reminder of the dark god's malice. The procession of monarch and guard continued into the deeps, the warm light of the Emperor proving a similar but contrasting source of illumination to the angel's fire, taking hidden paths and using esoteric powers to travel distances that had taken the Primarchs hours. In mere minutes, they were fast approaching the core. Still, even this abridged journey gained witness. The burnt and half-mad untainted survivors, lacking most of their senses, had still locked onto and witnessed the Emperor. Some cried tears of blood from burnt sockets. Others simply went utterly mad, loudly proclaiming for none to hear that God was real, and he is a thing of burning light. The Emperor spared them no attention. He was the guardian of the human race, capable and willing of sacrificing everything to ensure the survival of his kin. Even so, the millennia had worn hard on him. The God Emperor had forced him to reconnect with his increasingly distant humanity. This did not make him a saint or a god, just as casting it off did not. It simply made him more akin to the species he fought to save. Flawed and broken, but capable of anything and everything. The Emperor would spend the lives of trillions without a second thought if it meant saving existence from a chaotic extinction. Then after committing such an atrocity, he would grieve. In the great game of survival, morality is a luxury rarely afforded. Finally reaching the center of Luna, the Emperor telekinetically blasted his way into the volcanic chamber that held his goal. Within what had once been the Inner Sanctum lay two beings hovering between existence and oblivion. The body of the angel was a burnt husk, still glowing with a few faint sparks of power. It did not resemble the superhumanly compassionate women who had once been its host anymore. Approaching the angel, the Emperor reached out psychically, touching his creation. The angel was dying. To his presence, it reacted with the simple joy of a creation responding to its creator. The angel was a raw, uncontrollable thing that the Emperor feared and had locked away. Yet it loved him in the way only the innocent can. Utterly devoted to its master to the point of madness, the angel would do anything to please the Emperor. Touching a gilded hand to its ashen head, the Emperor whispered something, a long-forgotten phrase in a language unknown to all except one. It was not a prayer, but a simple eulogy to the dead, practiced by a tribe that once called the Sarkaria riverbanks home. It had accompanied the death of his emperor's father and countless others. A small snippet of the boy from Anatolia still alive within the master of mankind. Finishing, he looked into the broken eyes of the angel and spoke to its host. "I am so sorry, my love. It's over now. You can rest." With a thought, the final sparks of the angel fused with the Emperor, its golden energy turning a pale silver and hiding within the galaxy of souls, not becoming one with him like the final traces of the host did, but kept by the Emperor as a separate thing. The angel had returned home, and the saint who the Emperor had loved joined with her ancestors, children, and friends. From across time, space, and possibility, now the other occupant of the cavern awaited the Emperor's attention. A black stain of burning flesh oozed across the superheated stone, inching its way away from the light it feared above all. The soul of Sagittarius 17 had been neutered of its psychic potential and dark blessings, left only with his human emotions and memories, still anchored to the broken chaos spawn that had once been his body. Fighting with every twisted neuron and muscle to escape the Emperor, it wriggled along the burning ground. A telekinetic grip ripped him from the ground, suspending the spawn as its doom approached. Sagittarius 17's mutant eyes gazed upon the glory of mankind's rightful ruler. True, unbridled fear filled him. At that moment, Sagittarius 17 knew the consequences of every dark deal and shadowy scheme had come. Even as he bled millions in the quest for demonhood, Sagittarius 17 had never once doubted the righteousness of his cause, rationalizing the horrors committed as necessary to save his people. Now, when the souls of countless innocents, butchered by the creed of 4 phases, stared at him through the anathema's eyes, doubt and guilt crept into him. With the custodes still flanking him, the Emperor spoke. "A reward fit for a traitor and fool. I have use for you, Sagittarius 17. A thank you is in order as well. You will help teach humanity many valuable lessons." With those ominous words, the Emperor ripped open space-time and teleported all of the chamber's occupants, including the ashes of the angel's host, to the Bucephalus. Location: the Bucephalus Laboratory. Date: 8/30. 3 days since the end of the Lunar Crusade. With the intellect of the Primarchs, the industry of Mars, and the Emperor's wisdom, the Imperium rapidly recovered from the battle. Burned-out husks of chaos vessels were dragged to forge ships and melted down in great zero-G furnaces and infused with rune-inscribed silver wafers, adding raw adamantium and other more exotic materials to the Imperium's stockpiles. Millions of auxilia and legionnaires had faced the forces of chaos and crushed them underfoot. The Imperium had proven itself capable of protecting humanity and earned the true loyalty of the entire Sol system. Outside of Luna, the damage was paltry. Casualties were more than replaced by lunar refugees who added their technical knowledge in the sciences of genetics and voidcraft to the rest of Sol. The rebuilding of Luna was starting slow, but going steady. Scavenger clans burrowed through the wounded satellite, collecting everything of value. Acting Lunar Lord Petronilla Dorovna had rallied countless refugee groups to resettle the few mostly intact cities. Her charisma, psychic powers, and a diamond-hard core of subordinates who were now fervent convert to the imperial truth did wonders for morale and efficiency among the shell-shocked Lunarians. Fears of festering corruption were small. The Angel and later the 11 Legion had been thorough. Now it was up to the stunned survivors to handle the shock of most of their world descending into madness and rebuild. The horrors witnessed and the salvation by both angels of iron and fire had armed them against the whispers of chaos. Oaths were sworn by entire lineages to never again fall to the warp's touch. After numerous diplomatic, military, and infrastructure meetings to help guide the Imperium's recovery, the Emperor managed to escape to his secondary laboratory aboard the Bucephalus. All the pressing matters had been dealt with, and Malcador, along with his sons, could deal with anything else. So now, before any further steps were to be taken, the Emperor would attend to his fallen son. Stripped of his armor and laid out on a metal slab was the body of Horus Lupercali. The transhuman flesh was marred by numerous ugly wounds. Burns, lacerations, and contusions beyond count. The spear tip of destiny still jutted from his skull as an ugly reminder of Be'lakor. Horus's body was the current focus of the Emperor, and the Cognatu Ferrum, who operated numerous surgical servitors. Clad in plain white surgical scrubs, the master of mankind continued his most ancient art, the remaking and remodeling of humanity. Dark Age relics, biomancy, and ancient surgical practices were all employed in an exquisite manner. With a dozen tools gripped by his hands and mind, the Emperor worked. Shrapnel was plucked from muscle and skin. Dried blood was washed away, and fresher samples were taken to be cloned in great volumes. Warp tumors, born of unprotected flesh, exposed to the immaterium, were excised with a mixture of blade and pyrokinesis. Meticulously, perfect organs and muscle became whole once again. Cloned tissue was weaved into wounds, and the psychic imprint of Be'lakor and the gods was stripped away. The body of a Primarch does not decay like a normal being. Once it is no longer capable of sustaining life, it shuts down and works to preserve itself the best it can. The chemicals and tissues that had been bastardized to create the Sus and membrane worked hard to keep the body immaculate. This, like every other molecule of the gene-forged demigods, had a reason. Being born of both material and immaterial, a Primarch is never truly dead as long as something remains. With a destroyed body, a Primarch's psychic essence becomes an unanchored thing, half bonded to their father, half left to wander the immaterium, becoming something far greater and alien, leading armies of the damned, spreading bloody rage and redemption among its sons, reverting to its most primal, unchained self, becoming more like the angel than anything else. A repaired or cloned body would be a transhuman powerhouse trying to fulfill a purpose it never could. Stunted and golem-like, they would try to be a Primarch and only succeed in being a parody of such a being. If these two halves could be brought back together under certain conditions, the Primarch may live again. It was, of course, a risky process. The soul might be too far gone, more god than man. Giving it flesh would invite disaster. This fact had led the Emperor to gift Horus with the spear tip of destiny. The strands of fate indicated an attempt on the 16's life or sanity was virtually inevitable. To prevent the dark gods from this victory, a contingency was put in place. The spear tip of destiny was a tool allowing for the absorption, direction, and storage of psychic power. Millennia of reverence and myth had gifted it with these virtually unique psionic properties. The extent and power of this had never been fully tested, but the Emperor had gambled. The spear tip could, if used correctly, store a Primarch's spirit, preserving it from the warp's madness, just as a stasis box protected a corpse from rot. So, with a subconscious suggestion to encourage self-sacrifice, in face of calamity instilled in the 16s from a young age, the Emperor hoped his gambit would work. The Chaos Gods would indeed kill Horus, but he would not stay dead. Now, with steady hands, the Emperor pulled the spear tip from Horus, the ancient metal glowing softly in his touch, placing it in a Geller box as an extra measure of protection. The Emperor continued working on the damaged nerves and bone. Neurons were woven through flesh and replaced with gene-printed copies where needed. Using the access point provided by the fractured orbital socket, the Primarch's brain was the next item on the agenda. The Emperor briefly considered erasing or suppressing the memories Chaos had injected into Horus. That notion was quashed by the reality of the situation. Even if he could do it with no other side effects, parts of those memories were most likely burned into the soul residing in the spear tip. Spiritual memories, lacking a physical equivalent, never led anywhere good. Blocking them away would only delay the problem. You can build the strongest barriers, but a willful child will eventually find a way to crack them. So the memories would stay. The danger to his son was too great. That did not mean alterations could be made. The Chaos Gods had forced every horrid memory of the heresy, plucked from the traitor's victims, and the War Master himself into Horus. After the tragedy of Darwin the Sixth Season, Primarch became a true slave of darkness, believing the primordial annihilator had freed him when the opposite was true. The gods had puppeteered him and watched the galaxy through him until the siege itself Every memory and sensation the four had devoured while looking through the War Master's eyes had been what broke Horus. The suffering of trillions is not something a Primarch can bear lightly, but they can. Watching themselves commit such acts and know truly they were responsible for damning existence is another thing. So to save Horus, the Emperor would provide a single shift in the memories. He disassociated the Primarch from his alternate copy. Instead of feeling every action and thought of Horus Lupercali, Horus Lupercali would witness them. Hopefully, this would be enough. With those alterations finished, the Emperor had one last task before attempting a resurrection: to fix the destroyed eye. Psychic feedback had burned it away, leaving a perfectly bare socket. A Primarch could naturally regrow something like an eye, and the process of sculpting such a complicated thing was beyond the time and resources the Emperor currently possessed. A cybernetic replacement designed to detach from regenerating tissue would make do for now, linking wires to neurons with ease. A mortal man would tie his shoes. The Emperor inserted the eye. Suddenly, a blast of psychic sparks erupted, frying the cybernetic circuits. Electric smoke poured out of the rapidly breaking eye as the Emperor removed it. Puzzled, he checked the socket. No damage. The nerves seemed fine as well. Curious now, the Emperor tried another replacement and was met with identical results. After a third attempt, the Emperor checked the genetic hard drive within the Primarch's spinal column and was greeted with a surprise. The psychogenome markers that were in charge of the Primarch's right eye were gone, deleted by the psychic backlash of the Primarch's death. It took a moment for the Emperor to realize the symbolism. By some cosmic chance or more likely interference, the eye of Horus had been destroyed in a duel with a dark prince. Was it the Four playing a cruel prank, or a marker of something far more profound? Time would tell. Leaving the socket bare, the Emperor prepared the spear tip, ordering the cognatu ferrum to engage multiple safety measures and psionic barriers. The Emperor prepared to resurrect his son. Channeling his own psychic power into the spear, the Emperor caught the sleeping soul within. Like a man of war carried along by a tidal surge, the soul was swept from the spear. Protected by the Emperor's light, it flowed through immaterial currents into the flesh and brain of Horus Lupercali. With a great implosion of psychic power, the spear was emptied, and the first flickers of life returned to Horus. Like some revenant of myth, the Primarch bolted up. A blood-curdling scream erupted from the demigod's reborn lungs. With volume to burst human eardrums, the roar continued. Playing both roles of parent and medic, the Emperor worked to calm his son. The memories may have been dampened, but they were horrific. As some semblance of sanity came back, Horus looked at his father. The Emperor hoped relief or confusion would paint the Primarch's features. Instead, mad fury contorted them, with movements that outmatched any human but were clunky and slow for a Primarch. Horus leapt from the table and grabbed the Emperor by the throat. In a hoarse whisper, he spoke one of the dark truths revealed to him by the gods. And as he did, white fire erupted in his empty eye socket. Psychic energy playing the role of eye and leaking warp energy from the Primarch's very essence, signifying the catastrophic damage inflicted on both the mind and body of Horus. You knew this would happen. From the first moments, the warp-tainted bastards thought of treachery on Luna. You knew. Father, you watched the gods corrupt and drive most of Luna to damnation. At any point, it could have been stopped. So why? Why did my sons, countless innocents, Zamora, and I die? Howled the Primarch. With a grip that was both tender and adamantium strong, the Emperor removed his son's hands from his throat, and with a thought pushed Horus back. The simple chirurgian garb the Emperor wore shifted with its occupant. White fabric hardened to golden plates. Kilos of transhuman muscle sprang into being as the Emperor took the form of Battle King. Clad in beautiful Terminator armor and armed with a shining talon, he stood over his son. With force of will that could make legions kneel, he cowed his half-mad son, forcing Horus to a knee and stifling any further attacks that would hurt the Primarch more than the Emperor. With one eye of fire and the other of flesh, Horus glared up at his father. Wrath and fear were evident in his eyes. You know why, Horus? You saw just one possible fate the Four attempted to inflict upon the universe. I did everything and anything that was necessary to prevent that grim, dark future, responded the Emperor with cold fury in his eyes. Memories flickered through both father and son's eyes. The horrors of that possible future collected from both the God Emperor and the Dark Gods. The 12, screaming and crying as crude drills lobotomized him, replacing mortified nerves with a tool of ancient hate. Choking choirs of the Golden Throne as 1,000 psychers were plugged into it. Betrayed sons reclaiming the lunar wolf on the dying world of massacre. Billions torn to pieces and used as brick and mortar, building a cathedral of evil to entrap an angel. Drops of blood and ripped skin falling to the ground as Seven sought penance for failing his father. The galaxy burning in a feast for the gods as the Despoiler's legions marched. An age of war, where there is no peace or morality in the stars. A time of monsters, tyrants, and lunatics dueling over the ashes of existence. Horus snarled at the memories and spat back. I understand that the primordial annihilator must be stopped at any cost. But why did you do such foolish actions? Letting a cult fester within Luna, sending Zamora to his death. These were not the acts of one worthy of being named master of mankind. The Emperor did not react. Horus expected another thunderstorm of rage or worse. What he got was in some ways far more painful. With a monotone and almost unsure voice, the Emperor said, "It seems I overestimated you, Horus. You and your brothers are mighty and intelligent. In raising you, I hope to impart some of my wisdom and experience. Some have, but other lessons and concepts are still beyond you. It seems eons of existence and understanding cannot be learned, even by a Primarch. This is partially my mistake. I expected too much and assumed you and the others understood. Get dressed. This must be rectified." Even in his anger and confusion, the sense of disappointment and sadness that Horus felt from his father was incredibly painful. Despite the recent events, he did love his father and valued his opinion and respect over virtually anything. Feeling ashamed at his initial reactions, and still in whatever passed for shock within a Primarch's mind, Horus donned the plain uniform his father had provided and followed the Emperor, hoping for answers. On some level, Horus wondered if his shift in attitude was less him coming to his sense, or more his father realigning them. Location: the Bucephalus War Council Chamber. Date: 819. 30. 3 days since the end of the Lunar Crusade. In the days after the salvation of Luna, the Primarchs had gone about their business, cleaning up any straggling Chaos vessels and other duties. For each of the 19, they had managed to get back to a semblance of normalcy. The shock of the Chaos assault and the fall of Horus had worn on them. Marcus and Caleb were both evasive in answers. They told their siblings a brief summation of the events within Luna. Neither Primarch seemed to have a clear answer, but the message was understandable. Something terrible had happened, and Horus was dead. Shock had rippled through the brothers, and rumors started to circulate within the Imperium. A Primarch dead? Such a thing seemed impossible. Each of the Primarchs reacted according to their nature. Some bared fangs and called for vengeance. Others analyzed the possibilities and planned. Denial and disbelief were also common. Some, such as Philip Lott, Primarch of the Saxon Legion, believed that Horus was not truly dead. The Emperor had given them all life once before. What is to say, he could not do it again. When the Emperor called for his sons, they rushed to the Bucephalus. 19 Primarchs, the youngest split into 2 bodies, arrived in the gilded capital ship, eager for news. The Emperor had not been seen or heard from for days. Under Malcador's orders, they had done their duties and waited. The 16th Legion had reorganized under its Lord Commanders. Morale was low, and questions were many among them. The Primarch and the near entirety of the Legion martial elite were dead or severely injured. Still hope burned in the sons of Horus. Like the 11 and 13 Legion, they had received many merits in the Lunar Crusade. For now, they held out hope for good news and held their heads high. After all, it was the 16th who liberated numerous besieged loyalist outposts and led the initial evacuation attempts. Gathered in the War Council chamber, the Primarchs were oddly silent. 19 brothers sitting or standing around the massive strategy center. In this room, an entire interstellar campaign could be planned, organized, and conducted, usually bustling with custodes, admirals, generals, astartes, and every other branch of the imperial military. Now its only occupants were the quiet demigods. 20 minutes after all of them had arrived, its doors swung open once again. Like a golden dawn, the Emperor's light poured into the room. The Primarchs bowed as their father entered, only noticing something else behind him once the door shut behind the Emperor. Horus Lupercali stood there, alive but clearly not well. The Primarchs emitted various exclamations of surprise and joy, moving to embrace him and see to their thought-lost sibling. To their shock, instead of greeting them, Horus recoiled. Unknown to his brothers, visions of another reality flickered through the 16th mind. He saw the worst of each sibling. How the charming elegance of Iskandar could become serpentine depravity, or how Conrad's psychic gifts and moral compass might lead him into nihilistic madness. Of all the two he feared most was Dante and Philip. He could not bear to even look at either of them, for entirely different reasons. The sight of another Horus breaking the weeping angel as the Ain begged for an answer was far too much to dwell on. Antithetically, Horus had been always close to Philip, so the thought of his immediate younger brother orchestrating his and the universe's damnation was stomach-turning. Raising a gauntleted hand, the Emperor motioned for them to give Horus distance. Eddard, being firstborn, spoke first. "Father, we believed Horus to be dead. I see that is not true. What in terror's name happened within Luna? We thought the moon would be destroyed." Shakily, the pallid Lupercali answered, "I did die. I drove a spear of psychic power into my very heart and soul, all in an attempt to deny the four victory." Silence again filled the chamber. Such an idea seemed ridiculous, but the evidence was plain to their superhuman senses. The slight lurch to Horus's movements, his copper skin a sickly pale, and the lines of surgical scars along with the missing eye. In their brother, they could see a kind of animal aggression and stress, like an apex predator captured and experimented on. They could smell and even see the immense regenerative properties at work to heal the numerous wounds. Horus had indeed died, and badly it seemed, only for the Emperor to bring him back to life. A single shared thought independently entered the Primarch's mind. How and at what cost had this been done? At the Emperor's command, they all took seats around the central table. 22 mammoth chairs awaited the imperial royal family. Sitting down, the Emperor summoned a hollow projection of two objects, the moon and the spear tip of Longinus. Gesturing to them, the Emperor began speaking. Horus led the main assault into the cult's headquarters. Originally, he was to secure it and cut off the enemy command. Then await my arrival, so the warp rift could be closed. My delay by the primordial annihilator aspect known as Hashad prevented me from assisting. The primordial annihilator used this opportunity to directly attack Horus through the rift. Another hologram appeared, showing helm camera footage of Horus staring into the rift and screaming. At that moment, with my consciousness occupied, chaos unleashed an extremely devastating psychic assault with the intent of corrupting your brother. To give some context, the power used would have been enough to drive multiple planets to insanity. With rescue not possible and the warp cancer seeping into his mind, Horus sacrificed himself to stop the corruption. Why did he not reach out for our aid? We are linked psychically, and together we could have stood against this, asked Magnus. Bitter laughter from Horus answered, "You don't think I tried? If I managed to make contact with any of you, the insanity would have simply spread. I would not damn my brothers for my weakness in facing the dark gods unprepared. Even death was not enough to cleanse that horror." The Emperor continued. Horus drove his gift, the Spear of Longinus, into himself, killing his body and absorbing his soul. It was kept locked within the spear tip and not cast into the warp, making resurrection possible. Without similar circumstances, such a feat is impossible. This only occurred through my countermeasures, and a certain amount of cosmic happenstance. Anything can die, even you, my sons. Do not forget that. That sobering thought rippled through the chamber. With Horus fallen, the primordial annihilator were forced to another plan, using the leader of the cult as a host for Be'lakor, a particularly old and powerful Neverborn. With only the 16 Legion elite facing it, I decided to enact another failsafe was necessary. At my order, Malcador unleashed an experimental weapon to destroy Be'lakor and seal the rift. Said the Emperor, images of the angel now appeared. Its light was blinding, even diluted through pig feet. That is the angel, similar to Arik Taranis. It is a prototype for you, my sons. Raw power given purpose. Unstable, dangerous, and incredibly destructive. It succeeded in banishing Be'lakor back to warp, injuring it so thoroughly, I doubt it will be able to partially manifest for thousands of years. With Hashut cast into the deep, I could turn my attention to Luna and use the angel to shut the rift. Not a word was said for a solid minute. Breaking the silence, Horus spat an accusation. So now they know the events. Are you going to tell them the rest of it, or keep it hidden like so many other things? With an iron-hard gaze, the Emperor looked at his sons and spoke. I allowed the corruption and infiltration of Luna. This insurrection occurred according to my will. It was necessary for the survival of the human species. Why? Asked Rogolmor. Why put the Imperium, us, and the dream of unity at risk like that? The holograms blinked away, replaced with a series of thaumaturgical readings. Data about the rift within Luna. To the Primarchs, who were all versed to some degree in such sciences, a startling fact became apparent. The mammoth warp rift that had powered the Lunar Rebellion was much older than they thought. It was not born during the uprising as they assumed, but decades previously. That fact filtered into their minds and was shortly followed by other realizations provided. The rift had been created shortly before their birth, and its creation had released a surge of energy, both chaotic and anathemic throughout the solar system. Fate is a fickle and ever-shifting thing, said the Emperor quietly, as his sons watched the readings that had been recorded so many years ago, when the word-bearers and legion of the damned dueled in the artificial womb of his sons. Despite my best efforts, the primordial annihilator discovered you, my sons. Seeing the power you could become, it sought to claim the Primarch project for itself. By twisting the fabric of reality and sending its minion into my laboratory, it sought to cast you into the warp, where it could twist you each to their purposes. Originally, they succeeded, continued the Emperor. Dante and Conrad responded almost in unison, answering the question raised by the Emperor's phrasing. That was where the rift came from. The gods' attempt to change the timeline. To the twin seers of the Primarchs, the idea of shifting fate was most familiar. Yes, and they should have succeeded, sending you all hurtling into the warp, where I would duel them to arrange your fates. Each of you would land on a world fit to forge you or break you. Despite all my power, I could not save you, only give you each a chance to survive, responded their father. Why do you speak of such possibilities as if they were fact? was the near-frantic response of Kota. The idea of being cast into the warp, separated from his family, subject to the malice of chaos, brought a shiver to the 19th Primarch. Because they once were fact, in the destiny of the universe, set in place by the Four, they succeeded. Hundreds of years from now, 2 of you would die, and 9 would be corrupted, starting a rebellion that would ruin the Imperium and cast humanity into 10,000 years of misery. This was the fate set in stone by the self-proclaimed gods, spoke the Emperor in a somber whisper. This future was so inviolate that the minions who broke my wards and let the Four steal you all were corrupted Astartes, the original damned sons of the first heretic. As ordained by the Annihilator, they would prove their loyalty by unleashing evil across the fabric of existence. 1,000,000 variations of this event and its consequences occurred, all equally possible futures that all end with the laughter of thirsting gods, where humanity sacrifices all that is good and righteous in the name of ugly survival. Silence filled the chamber yet again. The idea of such a wretched fate seemed to pollute the very room. Ironically, the often silent Tengri spoke up first. This chaotic rebellion kills you and sets the universe down the path of extinction. Horrid, but makes sense. So then what stopped the Four from succeeding? The God Emperor of mankind was the Emperor's response. Visions of a broken husk upon a throne of sacrifice flickered through the Primarchs, the sight of a twisted, broken version of their father, locked in eternal agony in a desperate battle to hold back the darkness. At that moment, they understood. Information was conveyed through bursts of psionic energy. They saw the desperate hope of the Carrion Lord as it sent its legion of fire and souls back along the currents of time. How the Primarchs were saved and how a gift of knowledge and power redeemed the Emperor before he could fail. As the tidal wave of information crashed through the Primarchs' minds, the Emperor continued. I brought you all here for a few reasons. Horus's return is most obvious, yet in his wrath post-resurrection, he brought my attention to a serious problem, a lesson and gift I had thought you all possessed. This knowledge will help explain my choices and actions. To the naive and small-minded, I often seem inhumane and foolish. I am neither. In truth, it is the exact opposite. Possessing the wisdom of the ages, I must sometimes act in ways that seem incorrect. That is because I see what is, what can be, and what should be. The lunar rebellion occurred according to my will, because the other possibilities were worse. This grim truth and many more shall now be known to you. With those words, yet another bombardment of psychic imagery struck the Primarchs. Instead of memories and information, this was futures and possibilities. They saw how fate would unfold if different choices were made. How no matter how many wards and guards the Emperor placed around the rift, it would eventually unleash hell at the worst possible time, providing the tipping point needed for chaotic victory. So the Emperor let the gods use it as they pleased, pouring resources, time, and so very much energy into the lunar cultists, preparing to strike the Imperium hard and early. In fact, so early it shocked the Emperor, simply because instead of taking the tactical, or most efficient path of fate, they took the most grandiose and epic one. The gods, like all such things, are lies given sentience, false power, parasitizing everything it can. So they acted not as generals or masterminds, but as a storyteller, telling the tragedy of humanity's fall, how the Great Crusade failed before it could begin. If they waited a year, they could have struck a nearly undefended sol system, doing far more damage and only being pushed back by another secret of the Emperor. Instead, they fed the loose collection of lunatics the Four could call upon as their material army into the jaws of 20 legions. They expended colossal amounts of energy to summon Hashut and Belacor, not to mention the attempt to turn Horus. It all failed spectacularly. The loss of Zamora and the corrupted Astartes were the only victory for the gods. Zamora would be avenged, and even now the Emperor could detect the ripples in fate the Eversacrifice was setting forth. He would be a threat, but just one of many to be crushed. The unworthy Astartes had been culled, preventing the taint of their weakness from worming into the legions. By letting the moon burn and displaying the horrors of the warp humanity had been hardened, taught with blood and fire to hate the dark gods, to stand against those who sought to enslave or devour humanity. The Imperium would be founded on a bedrock of triumph. Triumph over mankind's worst foes. The mutant, the Xeno, the traitor, and worse. The death of Horus was a tragedy that could only be prevented by something worse occurring. Should the Emperor have abandoned his duel with an unborn god to save his child? In doing so, risk the death of countless trillions and humanity itself. He wanted nothing more to rescue his child from the warp's evil. Instead, he had a duty to protect mankind until the last spark of life left him. So the Emperor made the same bleak calculation he had since before the Egyptian pyramids were erected. Sacrifice the few to save the many. Yet all that could not compare to the impact the angel had. Instead of simply threatening the gods into shutting the gate totally. The angel had let the Emperor strike a blow against the Four. In all his worst visions of possible futures, he had only seen the gate close out of fear. Fear of a weapon being used on it and touching the gods. The reality that unfolded had been far better. Instead of chasing away the predators in the dark like so many times before, the Emperor had struck a blow at the circling horrors, driving the angel into the heart of chaos, scarring the gods, and setting the Four against each other once more, buying the Imperium time until the parasites could recover. The Primarchs understood now the true fickle nature of fate and how the Emperor dueled the gods for mankind's future. Literally and figuratively, they saw the great burden resting on those ancient shoulders, how he refused to share it with anyone, fearing the failure or destruction of any other who tried to assist. As each piece fell into place, the 20 sons of the Emperor experienced a great revelation. The Emperor had crafted them for many reasons. For now, they would sire and lead his armies. One day, they might help their father in something greater, become worthy to help shoulder that burden. 20 more lights to help push back the darkness. 20 more paragons to help guide humanity to salvation. The weight of eternity and infinity was not theirs to bear yet. Horus understood as well, but still felt a deep pain in his heart. The Emperor loved them as any father would. He just could not love them above all else. The Emperor must be the father, guardian, and protector of all mankind. It would break the immortal's heart to watch his children die. This would not stop him from letting all of them die, if it meant mankind survived. Something close to comfort, but far uglier, soothed the sixth scene in these thoughts. At least the visions of the God Emperor told him that if need be, his father would spend his own life as well. Courage, sacrifice, duty, honor. This is what the Emperor, no, what humanity requires. Horus promised to himself that he would never be found wanting. He had seen what failure meant. The killing fields of Istvan, the siege, the horror of chaos. With heavy hearts and adamantium will the Primarchs made vows to serve and protect humanity from the hungry darkness. They would be the light. They would be salvation. At that moment, the Emperor's sons changed. No longer were they the untempered youths of the imperial palace. Now they were Primarchs, demigods born and fit to stride the galaxy, bringing salvation to mankind and doom to its enemies. Location: unknown. Date: 8/34.30. Sagittarius 17. Did not know how long he sat in the darkness. After the anathema plucked him from Luna, he had been locked in a box of cold metal. Silver inscriptions inlaid in his container constantly burned any tainted flesh touching them, forcing the chaos spawn to huddle in a single corner. In the shadows, he waited, fear and misery oozing through his being. The failure of the Lunar Rebellion and his subsequent punishment broke Sagittarius 17. No longer the confident demagogue who turned Luna away from the Emperor. Now, he was little more than a twitching puddle of meat. The ability to sleep had been robbed by his mutation. So he simply waited, staring into the dark with a dozen eyes, each belonging to a different species and each protruding from his form at random locations. He could not even shut his eyes. His nerves were a jumbled burnt mess, forcing him to stare into the shadows and confront himself, cut off from the warp's power and locked in a box blessed by the anathema. Something strange started to occur. The madness of chaos started to leak away. Not enough to return sanity or even remorse to the broken being. Just enough for Sagittarius 17 to fully understand how much he had fallen, what he had become, and that he had none to blame for himself. Eventually, after what felt like weeks of waiting in the black, the box moved. Or at least, Sagittarius 17 thought it did. He lacked inner ears now. Sensing movement was rather difficult. After another period of stagency, his container moved. This time he was certain of it. These fits and starts of movement convinced Sagittarius 17 he was being moved somewhere. Another stimulus soon touched his consciousness. It was light, a pure bright light that scalded him. His very flesh started to hiss and pop at the illumination. This was because the light was not simple photons. It was the psychic feedback of the presence of the one Sagittarius 17 feared above all. The Emperor of mankind stood outside his container and had turned his focus to the chaos spawn. A shimmering face of golden sparks appeared in Sagittarius 17's mind. It was horrific in its perfection. A golden Adonais, incarnate of order and power. It spoke into his mind, and Sagittarius 17 shivered at its words. I am everything you think of me as. A tyrant, monster, abomination, anti-messiah, fiend, and worse. By my actions, trillions have died, and more will. The Great Crusade will be the single largest military campaign in human history. It will also be the single greatest atrocity our species has committed. The weight of sins greater than any except the first races shall be on me. Sagittarius 17. I tell you all this so you listen and understand what comes next. Despite all that, all my horrors and evils, I am humanity's only hope, and I am a saint in comparison to the beings you serve. Sagittarius, you betrayed our species, hoping to damn us all in your desire for petty boons and freedoms. You are like so many throughout history, chafing at any restriction or law because it exists, caring not for the consequences or understanding of why it is necessary. The face started flicker, and it finished its last words as the box moved one last time. And look where that has gotten you. A mutant hulk of broken flesh. Don't worry too much though. You still have purpose, Sagittarius 17. Humanity will learn from your sins. Your name will be recorded and hallowed like so many other myths. Icaros, Adin Shah, Harold, Hutler, Drumpft, Keon, and now Sagittarius 17 are known as mankind's great fools. I must thank you for this gift of knowledge and warning. With that, the face disappeared and Sagittarius 17 was left in the dark. But not for long. Location: the great chamber of the Senatorum Imperialis, under construction. Date: 835. M30. At the Emperor's command, the elite of the Sol system had been gathered. Generals, governors, dignitaries, and more had come to the heart of the Imperium. The great chamber of the Senatorum Imperialis, an unfinished edifice to imperial rule, that one day would hold the Emperor's court. For now, it had been cleared of equipment and served as an amphitheater for its master. In the center of the great structure stood the Emperor, a dazzling light on a podium of gold and adamantium. Floating above, and a bit behind him, on a set of grav platforms, was a massive container of black metal. Iterators and remembrancers scurried through the audience, hoping to catch every moment for documentation and inspiration. All 20 Primarchs and the Emperor's inner circle were seated around the podium, facing out and looking into the audience, a wall of superhumans separating the Emperor from his subjects. At the appointed time, the hall quieted, hundreds of thousands silencing themselves out of respect for the Emperor. He had summoned them all here to teach humanity, to explain the threat of chaos and why humanity must fight. The Emperor began his speech, which would echo across the ages and be known to humanity for eons to come. To each member of the audience, the words were different, The message filtered through perceptions of authority and power. Even so, the message was heard and understood. A terrible truth of the cosmos was unveiled. The Neverborn, sentient warp predators, feeding off insanity and worship. 4 false gods who sought to devour everything in their insatiable hunger for life. How the storms that cut apart the ancient human empire was the result of the youngest god's birth. That the reason psychers went insane and unleashed evil was these monsters. The Emperor explained how the 4 sought to enslave humanity, turn us into cattle, or worse, like so many other Xenos. Using countless examples from the Unification War, he demonstrated the corruptive nature of chaos. That religion gave them an opening. In a quote that would echo across eternity, the Emperor said, "Any being that demands worship is undeserving of it." Continuing, the Emperor spoke on the mythotype of demon and devil, how these were based on the Neverborn, just as the fair folk could be traced to the Eldari slavers. The enemy knows this and uses it. They want us to believe their invincibility and omnipotence. Like everything the Neverborn say, it is a lie or half-truth. The 4 hope to kill the Imperium in its cradle, dragging mankind eternally into the dark. They failed. The legions had broken them. 20 legions of superhumans were crafted to protect mankind from the horrors of the universe, no matter if they were alien, mutant, or Neverborn. The lunar gene cults had fallen for the promises and power of chaos. Like every other fool who choose chaos, they had betrayed the Imperium and mankind. That is what the chosen of chaos are. Traitors who sell themselves and their species to parasites and predators. The lunar cult hoped to feed every man, woman, and child of soul to a sentient evil. This enemy would show no quarter, and they must give none. In facing chaos, mankind fought not just for its right to exist, but its very soul. In ancient times, the Emperor had been chosen to help protect and guide humanity. He was no god nor demon, just a very old and powerful human. One who had walked the golden path of salvation and hoped to guide his kin along it. For humanity, everyone from the highest noble to the lowest serf was kin. One species, one soul, one that must unite together against the hungry dark. Unite in the light or die in the dark. To further prove his point, the Emperor summoned up a hollow portrait, showing a handsome young Genewright of Luna. Gesturing to it, he continued speaking. This was Sagittarius and 17, a brilliant Selena cultist who hoped to do great things. He and his followers listened to the whispers of faith and followed the self-proclaimed gods, unleashing the horrors of chaos on the solar system. For this, he was rewarded by his masters. I want you all to see the blessings of chaos. At that, the metal crate fell open. A scream powered by over 500,000 lungs was forced from the audience as they saw its occupant. The chaos spawn, Sagittarius 17, hung in the air, held in place by a force field and inscriptions. The handsome portrait of what he once was orbited the creature, providing a terrible contrast to the mass of limbs, organs, and other parts. Grasping out with stunted arms and peering with shrunken eyes, the creature moaned in horror. With the screams and shock dying down, the Emperor gestured to it and spoke. You can all feel that, can you not? The disgust rising in your very soul, the knowledge that something cannot be. What you are feeling is the aura of chaos, the warp's corruption seeping from its fallen servant. No simple gene horror or mutant can produce such a thing. You all feel it, the evil that seeks to devour your soul. With a gesture, the Emperor summoned dozens of men and women from alcoves near the podium. They ranged from mighty Astartes and cold Scitarii to simple PDF troopers. In total, the group held representatives of every military branch in the Imperium. As one, they leveled their weapons at the Chaos Spawn. That evil is real, but it is not invincible. Far from it, in fact. The legions cast the armies of hell back into the pit. They, along with the rest of the Imperium's might, must be leveled against this foe. I ask you, every citizen of the Imperium, from now till the end of this long war, to fight. Not for gods, wealth, or anything so simple. Fight for survival. Fight so that one day your descendants may know a galaxy free from horrors. Place your faith, not in false gods and false kings, but in humanity. Stand strong, and together the darkness will be pushed back. The horrors of old night shall be no more. The age of strife is over. This is now the age of the Imperium. As his words echoed around the great hall, the representatives of the Imperium's might opened fire. Bolt, las, plasma, and kinetic rounds punched into Sagittari 17, reducing the traitor to ash, letting his tortured soul fly screaming into the maw of chaos. With the Emperor's great proclamation and the destruction of the Chaos Spawn, a great cheer erupted in the chamber. Any being without protected or enhanced hearing suffered damage to their ears. Thousands rose from their seats and gave thunderous applause. The enemy of man was known, and nothing would stop the species from avenging a trillion crimes. The Emperor let a smile cross his ancient lips and looked into the warp, watching as this moment provided mortar to build mankind's future. The easiest way to unite tribes is giving them a common enemy. He had originally hoped to wait until mankind was safe within the webway before telling them the truth regarding the enemy. Too many risks with naive and dangerous children. The God Emperor's experience had brought him to a different conclusion. Better to destroy whatever innocence was left in humanity than let its nativity ruin them all. The applause eventually died down as the soldiers took empty seats and the Chaos Spawn's remains were cleared away. Summoning a new holographic image, the Emperor continued. This image was a stylized cast in silver, capped with a human skull on each end. This enemy is not a simple thing. They fight not just on the fields of battle, but in wars of shadow and manipulation, worming its way into our lives like the parasite it is. While the legions and auxilia may stand against the forces of chaos, we need guardians to battle the spread of this taint. As such, I am announcing the formation of a new body of the Imperium. The Adeptus Umbrex will fight and die in the shadows. So one day, we can all live in the light. The symbol floating here will be the marker of the first child organization of the Umbrex. The Silver Order, humans selected for their skill, strength of will, and inquisitive mind. Who shall battle the corruption of chaos wherever it may be found? Imperceptible to all, the Emperor paused for an infinitesimal moment on the words, inquisitive mind. He knew what he was creating, an inquisition to hunt his enemies. All he could hope was with his, Malcador, and the twins' guiding hands, this order might not fall to the levels of that infamous organization. It was still necessary. The Officio Assassinorum and a few other groups would be rolled into this Adeptus Umbrex. He could already see the power and threat such an organization would present. It could not be allowed to be corrupted. Drastic measures would be taken, similar to the ones already being implemented with the Astartes. With a few more parting words, the speech ended, and the Imperium was forever changed, warned against the darkness and hopefully armed against it. Location: the Imperial Laboratories. Date: 814. M30. Apothecarium. Primus Fabius was hard at work inside the Imperial Palace's secret gene vaults. For years he had toiled, separated from his beloved Legion by one of the Emperor's projects. He had to admit that on some level he was envious of his brothers, earning merits and accolades out in conquest of soul. Still, he knew his work was far more important than anything they could hope to achieve. The three legions sought to master and perfect whatever they put themselves to. For his brothers, that was war. For Fabius, genecraft would be perfection. The project, as he and the other apothecaries entrusted with it called it, was another contingency the Emperor had devised. In the master of mankind's infinite wisdom, he had prepared a tool in case of widespread corruption to the Astartes legions. The project was the cultivation and preparation of immense stores of purified gene seed. Each cultivated organ had been infused with a few molecules of the Emperor's blood, a carefully selected amount that would provide protection, power, and new life to the gene seed, but not enough to be stolen by nefarious forces. The 20 legions had suffered casualties in the Lunar Crusade. First, the unworthy culled by the lure of chaos, then those who fell in battle, lastly the wounded and the broken. The mutation unleashed by the Creed of Four Phases had inflicted brutal organ damage on the Astartes. Nearly every legionnaire suffered severe physical damage. The Dochni drive could repair most, but not all of it. Some damage to the gene seed organs was so profound even the drive could not fix it. So now Fabius and his comrades had the duty of replacing the damaged organs, using the purified organs to fix the 20 legions in a massive surgical operation. Each legion suffered defects in particular organs. Fabius suspected this was due to the contamination method used by the Creed, allowing the nearly 2 legions worth of gene seed to repair all 20 Astartes bloodlines. For weeks, the apothecaries of the legions and countless other genesmiths healed the Astartes. One by one, the stricken space marines arose from the operating table reborn, faster, stronger, resistant to the warp, and infused with a bit more of the spiritual essence that elevated Astartes beyond mere gene warriors. Astartes, like their gene sires, are beings of both planes. Human children reforged both physically and spiritually into angels of death. One of the lesser known but incredibly powerful gifts of the Astartes is the saga. Each Astartes is psychically attuned in a unique way by their genocide, allowing them to subconsciously harvest the psychic energy they produce through great deeds. With every legend and act of heroism committed by an Astartes, they grow in strength. Fabius did not know this ability was the reason in the grim darkness of the far future that mere chapter masters and captains of the chapters could defeat demon princes and other powerful horrors. If each Primarch was a myth given flesh, the Astartes were soldiers infused with the power of their heroism. This infusion of mythological blood would increase the potential of this ability, along with a few minor boons. Unfortunately, Fabius doubted this power would pass along through genocide. Future Astartes, born from the Primarchs or fallen brothers, would be standard space marines. These veterans of the solar conquest, though, they would be something truly unique. With this great work in mind, Fabius said to his next patient, typically, the apothecaries of a legion treated their brothers and left the injured of other legions to their respective brothers. This patient was an exception. The skills of the 6 scenes medici were not up the level needed. Sourly, the 6 Sinti called in Fabius to save their champion. Abaddon, the Redeemer, lay on the surgical table, flitting between life and death. The marred warrior had suffered greatly in his duel with Belacor. Only the activation of Sus and sleep kept him alive long enough for his apothecary brothers to patch him up. Even with the 6 Dean Genocide's gift, it was nothing short of miraculous that Abaddon lived. Nearly every organ in his body, natural or not, was brutalized. His skin was a patchwork of scars, electrical burns, and graft tissue. Sheer statistics said that something should have given out by now. So much was damaged, 1,000 systems that were needed for life, each pushed and broken to the very edge. Yet Abaddon held on, drifting in and out of pained consciousness between surgeries. Each time he awoke, his shredded tongue worked with burnt lungs to cry out a single desperate word. Horus! The half-dead son called for his fallen father. Some part of Abaddon the Redeemer knew Horus lived, in some shape or form. Deep inside his soul, something told him that the 16 and its Primarch survived the impossible. Neither Fabius nor his attendants bothered to inform Abaddon of his father's return. They had other patients to attend to, and worked as efficiently as they could. Such distractions were not necessary as they worked. Eventually, after a near day of intense surgery, Fabius' team approached the final hurdle, the replacement of Abaddon's Magnificat. The strain of using a demigod's weapon had blasted apart the Astartes godmaker. Now, a fresh and enhanced version would take its place. With black carapace-linked mechadendrites and a precision forged at the Emperor's side, Fabius linked individual neurons and blood vessels together, fusing new life into the husk of Abaddon. Pulling away from his work, the apothecary primus of the Throne Legion let out a deep breath. This had been by far his most stressful operation. Now all he had to do was shut off the neural dampener and let the Magnificent activate. Pressing a button on his surgical station, the genius Astartes prepared to move his next patient. Without warning, a blast of light detonated in the operating theatre and sent Fabius flying against a nearby wall. The impact was strong enough to force bile from Fabius's mouth. As his enhanced vision adapted to the light burst, he glanced over at the table. Fabius was cold-hearted, even for an Astartes, but concern for his patient flickered through him. Interestingly, the blast had not affected Abaddon. In fact, he seemed to be the source. A second pulse of light echoed out. This time the apothecary was prepared for it and braced himself for the impact. The energy faded and a medical miracle captured Fabius's attention. Abaddon's exposed tissue started to pull itself out of surgical clamps. Muscle tissue bulged with some supernatural power. Scars faded like washed-away stains. Wounds closed fully, and Abaddon swelled with power. It was like watching the entire developmental process of a human child being played out in mere minutes. Flesh, bone, and organs grew and shifted. His limbs lengthened and thickened. Injecting sites spat out their needles. Abaddon twitched to life. Readying his sidearm and a particularly nasty surgical implement, Fabius prepared for battle. He knew the power of the warp well. It coursed through Fabius's patient and mutated him. Fabius was a lesser warrior by Astartes standards, but he calculated he could euthanize Abaddon in his stupor before he fully awakened. Jolting and twitching like a live current was tracing through his muscles. Abaddon dragged himself off the operating table. Shooting a hand out like a viper, he clutched Fabius's foot with an iron grip. Abaddon stared up at his surgeon. Ferocious willpower etched into his face, and a curious warp light pouring from his missing eye. Glowing with supernatural power, Abaddon croaked out words in a rasping tone that told Fabius his vocal cords were still in the process of repairing. "Take me to my father. I have something of his." To Fabius's shock, he felt the unmistakable presence of a Primarch from Abaddon. A lesser shadow indeed, but still something beyond mistaking. Slowly, Abaddon rose to his feet, and Fabius felt his mouth fall open against his wishes. The Astartes had grown massively, nearly matching a Primarch in size. The psychic energy bound within Abaddon had invigorated his magnificent organ, healing him and bulking his body to near Primarch heights. The scientific mind that made Fabius so prized set to work as he and Abaddon stared at each other. The Magnificent was only half of the Godmaker gland, and the countless other augments and alchemical forgings that made a Primarch were missing. Abaddon would not match any Primarch, but he now stood above any Astartes. Stronger, faster, smarter, and tougher than any other mortal. He was possibly comparable to an elite Custodes, but Fabius lacked the data to be sure. It was a sour note for him that the Emperor refused knowledge of the Golden Brotherhood. Crack. Fabius was brought back to the present when Abaddon put a power fist-sized hole in the wall above the apothecary's head. The psychic flame in Abaddon's missing eye flared brighter as he spoke again. "Now!" Quickly, Fabius escorted his patient out of the laboratories and handed him off to custodes patrolling the complex. Whatever happened now was not his problem. Back to work he went, fixing 20 legions and musing about what over-alterations or improvements were possible to the Astartes form. Preparing for his next patient, he stopped to check the gene vault registry for the best match of gene seed. As he peered through the data, something caught his eye. Geneseed was missing, an entire numbered batch from each bloodline. Checking the access records, he realized the Sigillite himself was the culprit, nonplussed but confident in Malcador's loyalty. Fabius figured it was another project of the Emperor's. Still, the fact that all 20 of the Legion's 666th batch of purified Geneseed was gone seemed rather strange. Location: an artificial cavern somewhere within Titan, moon of Saturn. Date: 8/14, M30. Malcador the Sigillite stood in the massive subterranean structure, being burrowed into the cold rock of Titan. With more senses than he should possess, he watched the process of excavation and construction. At the Emperor's orders, a series of fortresses were being built within the moon, shadowy repositories where the Silver Order would operate from. Unlike nearly all of the solar system, Titan had been virtually untouched by human hands throughout the species' history. Disturbing rumors and tragic accidents had plagued Titan since the first Saturn colonies, keeping all but the bravest and the most stupid of pioneers away. This pattern was not mere statistical anomaly, of course. The veil between certain and possible was razor-thin here. In fact, the first warp experiments conducted by mankind had taken place on this now deserted rock. Malcador himself was not certain which came first to Titan, the experiments or the reputation. That was even before his time. In his wisdom, the Emperor had selected Titan to house the Silver Order and other additions to the Adeptus Umbrex. Construction had started almost the moment talons of the Emperor landed and surveyed Titan during the solar conquest. The creation of this new headquarters had fallen to a joint commission of warsmiths and occultists in imperial employ. Filling it had fallen to Malcador, or at least partially. Using the already vast resources of the Adeptus Terra, Malcador had found hundreds of possible candidates, each one of them a loyal citizen, who had proven themselves worthy in some regard. Through numerous trials and cullings, only a few dozen remained. The Silver Order would require the best of what humanity had to offer. Its founders and leaders need to be more than that. 5 executor and a handful of agents would form this bedrock. Each had proven themselves worthy time and again, most recently in a ritual that would form the Order's heart. At the Emperor's orders, a single drop of his clone blood anointed each founder's forehead. This diluted shadow of the Emperor's essence burned a distinct mark into them, a triplicate-shaped scar on their forehead that offered protection from chaotic taint. By being infused with the anathema's power, they became empowered and protected against the evil and unreality of the great enemy. In the presence of the warp's taint, the scar would burn again, providing a harsh warning against the immediate danger of the Dark God's power. In the coming millennia, the agents of the Silver Order would all be marked in this way. Alongside this, each agent would be gifted a badge of inscribed silver, vesting in them the confidence of the Adeptus Terra. Through these twin sigils, the Silver Order would be marked as servants of the Emperor. These initial members were now hard at work building the organization they would lead. Countless arcane treasures and secrets were being ferried to the largest of the moon's fortresses. This Sanctorum Citadel, as it was named, would be the chief center of the Order. It was a massive thing of polished stone and inscribed metal, rising from Titan's fog like some colossus of old. At its very heart would be a blood cloner of immaculate making, where a vial of the Emperor's blood would be recreated over and over. Malcador could already see the day when the first tainted candidate would enter that hallowed hall. They would be certain in their trickery, hoping to steal the Emperor's gift in the name of chaos. The traitor would die screaming as the ichor burned through his skull like liquid fire. A similar fate would befall any agents who gave in to temptation and believed the great enemy. The Silver Order, while important, was not the reason Malcador was here, though. In fact, he was on the direct opposite side of Titan, from the Sanctorum Citadel. His journey took him within an unfinished fortress that would match the Citadel in every way but one. It was inverted, sticking into Titan's bedrock instead of out of it. This unnamed fortress would house another, far deadlier and more secretive tool for mankind's ascension: the Silver Knights, an order of psycho warrior monks who would battle the forces of chaos. They would be the third member of the transhuman trinity that would protect humanity: the Golden Custodes, the Steel Astartes, and the Silver Synites. The creation of this new breed of warrior had been yet another of the many projects the Emperor had engaged himself in. Malcador stood beyond mankind in countless ways, but the Emperor's intellect and sheer ability sometimes startled him. Of all his countless plans and schemes, Malcador knew maybe the least about the Silver Knights. He was familiar with the basic concept, though. They were designed to be a strike force of anathema-blessed space marines who could quickly and efficiently handle chaos incursion and demonic attacks. The details of their order or their methods he could only guess at. The 20 batches of enhanced genocide provided ample clues, however. Malcador now journeyed deeper into the fortress, the watchful eyes of Custodes following him with every step. The inversion within the Citadel's design went beyond simple reversal in polarity. Whereas the Sanctorum was built to shield from the warp, this fortress channeled it. Its complex psychosensati architecture acted as a tuning fork, drawing up a stream of pure spiritual energy, born of the Astronomicon's purification and God-forging. It was gathered and molded into anathematic currents of power that filled the fortress, turning it into a sepulchre of golden power, untouchable by the dark gods. In its center, directly opposite the Silver Order's anointing chamber, across the world, waited the Emperor. The concentrated warp stuff was near blinding, even discounting the master of mankind's aura. With keen witch sight, Malcador peered through the sacred fog and watched his lord's work. All this energy and the ritual science at work served a clear purpose. The Emperor was attempting something unheard of for millions of years. Of course, bastardized versions like what occurred on Moloch happened, but this was a refined and attuned version of a feat the ancient Eldari named God-calling. The Emperor had been forced to reclaim through force the first calling, ripping the power from thirsting gods and escaping the heart of chaos. Now he had power solely belonging to him, the souls of honored martyrs in the grim dark future. They would be perfect for birthing new legends and demigods into flesh. Faint psychic feelers traced across Malcador's mind, and he understood why he had been called. Malcador would be a witness and judge for what would come, an honor given to an old friend. Surrounding the Emperor were 8 transhuman bodies, each a custom-grown hybrid of Custodes and Astartes' biosorcery. They were modeled on various stories: monster hunters, demon slayers, protectors of humanity. All 8 were in a state of death, soulless, with their chests splayed open. The Emperor had removed one of each of the twin hearts the bodies possessed. Why he had done so soon became apparent. Floating in a halo of silver light around the Emperor were 8 spheres of silver light. At the center of them were ancient gemstones, carved from Mother Terra and blessed by countless faiths. Malcador quickly understood the silver light inhabiting the gems was all that remained of the angel. 8 shards of the broken spirit, placed in 8 ritual stones. Powerful ingredients, yet not the only ones in this process. Using the power and resonance within the chamber, the Emperor pulled 5,328 souls from within him, each a celebrated Astartes, and all had died for their God-Emperor. One by one, the Emperor asked each soul a simple question. For most, duty ends in death. Will yours? All 5,000 and more souls responded. Even beyond death and rebirth, they would serve. The souls were split into 8 portions, 666, added to each crystal, providing ages of wisdom and humanity to temper the angel's power. Then the gems, carried along by the currents of anathema energy, took the missing heart's place. Seeing that his work was progressing, the Emperor turned to Malcador. A galaxy of souls stared into the Sigillite's soul. In that moment, Malcador felt what the Prophet Mos must have on Mansihai. He stared into the face of God. It was great and terrible in magnificence. Here, away from prying eyes and consumed by his work, the Emperor had dropped the facade. He was the human anathema, God-caller, soul-keeper, master of mankind, ancient protector, dragon slayer, bastard of ancients, lord of sanity and reality in all its glory. With words that could reduce worlds to blind awe, he asked Malcador, "Shall we take the next step upon the shining path together, my friend?" Tears of gold poured down Malcador's face as he nodded his consent. The ancient psyker gripped his staff hard enough to crack his withered bones as he watched. The channeled power poured into each body. Tidal waves of warp energy infused with the figures suspended in the air, bonding the crystal hearts to flesh and healing their surgical wounds. The power became one with the newly born demigods. Their very flesh and blood became infused with the warp. Once simple meat, They were now living conduits to the Sea of Souls. This miracle of warpcraft combined immaterial and material together, creating 8 silver paladins to serve the Emperor. Detecting Malcador's awe, the Emperor let out a small, understanding smile and spoke to his friend in a rapturous voice. While impressive it may be, this is but a pale shadow of the Primarchs' creation. I used a single saga to breathe life into these 8, so very much more went into each of the 20. My sons are God's given flesh. These are but humble archangels. The first of these newborn archangels took a breath. The paladin sucked in the cold oxygen of the chamber and asked the light that created him, Who am I? Garrow, as Kaelan. These memories, whose are they? The light answered in calm thunder, They were who you once were. Now you are Mikhail, Paxiarch of Order, the First Lord Paladin of the Silver Knights. The answer calmed the incarnated angel, an identity to focus and meditate on. With each awakening, the other 7 were named. Kidu, Helsing, Sol Wukong, Osaimi, Perseus, Jediah, and Dolzak, the Lord Paladins of the Silver Knights. Each of them were armed and armored in blessed silver and adamantium. Knowledge infused by the Emperor and their past lives filled the 8, giving them the wisdom to know how to properly use the tools that they were given. As one, they soon bowed to the Emperor and swore fealty to the Master of mankind. With those formalities, the Silver Paladins left the 2 ancients to start their duties. They were each a shard of the anathema, perpetuals bound to a gem of pure light. The 10,000 knights who would follow their footsteps would be born of hybridized geneseed. 20 batches, 1 from each legion, would become 10,000 progenoids of this new breed of transhuman. Another brotherhood of heroes to match the custodies. Like the sun setting, the Emperor dimmed and returned to his human form. The great enemy took a fallen champion of theirs and remade him into a threat. The Emperor said, looking every bit the avenging force of order and justice, I shall return the favor 8-fold. The Silver Order and Knights were born, another tool to help protect humanity. When the Great Crusade left Sol, it would be armed and armored in gold, silver, and steel. Location? The Bucephalus at Sol's Mandeville Point. Date: 8/17, M30. It had taken 2 years, but the Imperium had returned itself to new heights. 20 reborn Astartes legions, the Imperial Auxilia, the Mechanicum of Mars, the Silver Order, and the talons of the Emperor stood ready to retake the galaxy for mankind. The Primarchs had taken time to get accustomed to their father's newest creations. Some feared replacement for their recent failures. Those worries were put to rest soon enough. The 20 brothers soon came to respect their otherworldly and anomalous kin beings. The light of the Astronomicon illuminated all its light touched with order and sanity. But on the fringes of the galaxy, beyond the reach of the light emanating from Sol, the material world tore itself asunder as the warp thrashed in its eternal game of horror. The 4 battled for dominance, seeking to exploit the illuminated weaknesses while protecting their own. Across the galaxy, chaotic cults dissolved into civil war as their gods went to war with themselves. All pretense of cooperation and undivided chaos were but a distant memory. The madness created such a horrid storm that any warp space untouched by the Astronomicon was unnavigatable. The reaches of the Ultima Segmentum become awash in warp storms that matched the worst of old night. This would not last forever, though. The Emperor knew that. Eventually, his threat would temporarily unite the four, and the respite would be over. Until then, a galaxy of threats awaited. The Orcish empires grew like the fungal infestation they were, fueled by never-ending war with themselves and others. Even now, the great call of Wah echoed through the warp as beasts of Armageddon clashed for dominance. The Old One's lesser folly needed to be dealt with, and fast. Across the galactic north, the Emperor despised looking. The sheer horror of entire worlds being devoured by the Rangdans was stomach-churning. Like all viruses, they did not kill cleanly. If unchecked, they would infect all life and bring about a doom ghastly enough to match chaos machinations. On uncountable worlds, the dragon's kin and former slaves slept, waiting to reclaim the galaxy for reasons that varied from banal to insane. The Aeldari remnants were also fast organizing. The Dark City bloomed, and the craft worlds mourned the fall. For the webway to be truly mankind's, they and the last Old One must be bound or broken. Then, to add further complications, self-righteous petty kingdoms of fellow humans would resist unity. In their hubris, they were desperate to retain freedoms they were unworthy of, gladly marching to extinction or worse, simply because they could. All these threats faced the Imperium of mankind. Each threatened to strangle mankind's destiny in its crib. Standing aboard his flagship, the Emperor answered this galaxy of nightmares with a command. A new dawn has come. All ships, activate warp drive. With the thunder of thousands of warp engines, the firmament grew bright. Humanity had once again left Sol, and once again the galaxy awaited. Location: Valley of Laponis, Macragge. Date: 809 M30, Terran time. Falling stars were often referred as omens throughout human history. Even in domains and ages where the truth of their nature was known, they still held significance. This proved true upon the world of Macragge, where they are associated with good fortune and divine boons. So when reports across the Ultramar kingdom spoke of a star burning through the sky and impacting in the northern wilderness, it was taken to mean great things were in store for the mightiest nation upon Macragge. This quickly changed once the nightmares started. An epidemic of horrible dreams and night terrors spread across the kingdom, rippling from the northern wilds like some spiritual shockwave. With each setting of the sun, fear gripped the normally stoic citizens of Ultramar. Sleep was fast turning from respite to source of fear. All across the Magna Macragge Civitas, the night was punctuated by bloody screams and panicked yells. Poor souls fell asleep and were now trapped within their worst fears and thoughts. Ultramar was not a superstitious kingdom. Religion and tradition had its place. Science, reason, and analytical thought were considered high values, used to govern and run the state. This made the appearance of doomsayers and fanatics screaming of divine judgment all the more bizarre. Every night, the situation only intensified. The barbarism of fear and paranoia had grown deep roots across Macragge. One lunar cycle into the madness, Consul Conor Gulliman took it upon himself to find answers. Wise and strong beyond his years, the young politician had proved himself in the arts of politics and war. Showing leadership and level-headedness, he rallied a cohort of Macragge's soldiers to investigate the nightmare's source. Theoretical, some Xeno or ancient artifact had triggered a psychic phenomena. Practical, the nightmares had been first noticed in the villages surrounding the valley of Laponis. The remote valley was one of the more wild places on Macragge. Hera's Crown Mountains were named as such because of the valley. The great range was roughly oval, shaped with the valley forming a cleft in the middle. The opening of the crown to match the peak's points. Surrounded by steep, jagged mountains on all sides, it was remote, and only the wildest huntsmen and wanderers inhabited it. Conor had visited it once before as a youth. A number of the noble families of the capital city had taken to hunting the valley, its remote location providing solitude and natural wonder to the Macragge elite. Then, it had been a jewel of ancient woods and mountain-fed streams, untouched by human hands, and a home to statuesque herds of mountain cervidae. The old temples of the Civitas told tales of Dia, goddess of the hunt, and her pack of wolf daughters stalking its forbidden groves. Conor paid such things little mind. His religious beliefs were a private affair. He honored the old pantheon and his ancestors. The legends were exactly that, stories to guide and teach. The gods, if they ever existed, were long gone. No matter what the lunatic prophets claimed, when the warp storms had intensified these last few months. While the warp's instability had cut off Macragge from its trade partners in other systems, this was no evidence of a clash between gods or other such nonsense. So when the cohort, with Conor at its head, reached the valley's opening, the consul's words were out of character. By the gods, what has happened? From their vantage point in the cleft between two mountains above the valley, the cohort could see its entirety. Gone were the verdant hills and lush forests. Ash and the husks of dead wood remained. The raw stink of death and decay polluted the mountain air. The war steeds of the expedition were instantly spooked. Some instinctual knowledge filled them, and their riders of the danger lurking below. Even so, these citizens of Macragge had a duty to fulfill. At Conor's orders, the expedition traced the mountain path down into the valley, taking note that the death and rot seemed to intensify with each step. Deeper and deeper into the now barren valley they marched, where in the heart of the valley they found their target. Smashed into a bluff was a crater. Like some unholy arrow of judgment, the fallen star had burrowed a cavern into the hill. A pool of contaminated water lay at the cavern's entrance. The once pure glacial pond fouled by putrefied matter and excrement. The source of the ruination formed a barricade at the lip of the cave, Piles and piles of bones were picked clean and scattered in a makeshift refuse pile. Nothing aside from the 301 men of the cohort lived in this damned hollow. This was the source of the infestation that had killed the valley of Laponis. Guilliman could feel it. Something within that cavern had drained the very life from this once beautiful domain. Connor knew on some instinctual level that it was also the nightmare's source. Whatever it was, the cohort would discover the truth. A fast rider had been sent back to the capital, a contingency if the worst happened. Connor Guilliman had no intention to die here, but he was a practical man. A danger unlike anything he had faced was nesting in the valley. As consul of Ultramar, it was his duty to protect its citizens. With stubber and charge blade in hand, he led the force to the cave mouth. Multiple ranks of soldiers were prepared to open fire on anything that exited the cavern. These were experienced citizen soldiers of Ultramar, bloodied against the bandit clans of the north, and hand-picked by the consul himself. They died badly. Before the cohort could react, a great shadow exploded from the cavern. Some massive hulk of twisted flesh and metal moving at speeds beyond mortal ken. The creature leapt over Connor and smashed into the first line of soldiers. Scything talons shredded muscle and bone. Its great clawed fists crackled with witchfire. In the time it took Connor to spin around and open fire, a quarter of the cohort was little more than burning corpses. The monster weaved between stubber and last fire with supernatural grace. Each blow punched through plasteel armor and reduced a literal handful of soldiers to burning shreds. Connor had faced warpcraft before, and this atrocity stunk of such things. His brilliant mind dueled itself as emotion and logic battled. Theoretical, this monster was beyond anything in Macragge's records and was supremely deadly. Practical, he was about to die. Connor emptied his stubber's clip into the creature's flank and shouted frantic orders that went unheard in the cacophony of violence. The monster's armor deflected every projectile and blade that attempted to pierce its hideous, organic armor. The consul doubted anything less than artillery would crack its blackened shell. As the thing busied itself with Connor's soldiers, he noted its bizarre appearance. Its form resembled a man, at least partially, decked in broken armor of Tartarus theme. From each hand stuck great claws that matched a man's torso in size. Psychic flames coated the talons and swirled around the creature, forming a burning mantle. Instead of a man's face or helm, its head took the form of a vaguely Draco-lupine form. It was disturbing in many ways, the least of which was how it moved and acted like living flesh, despite being formed of burnt metal. Below the waist, any semblance of humanity was discarded. Its midsection was a mess of burnt tissue and putrefying flesh, crudely attached to warp-crafted legs made of cursed bone and sinew. The necromantic construct resembled insectoid limbs and added another level of horror to the creature. Nothing seemed to even slow the monster. The only impediment to its slaughter was the sheer numbers of the 300-strong cohort. It took the beast time to cleave through the humans, time that a lesser or more practical man would have used to flee. Instead, Connor fought valiantly alongside his soldiers. They all knew that if this evil was not stopped here, it would eventually make its way to their homes. With courage and honor, they would die to defend Macragge, and so they did. After what felt like hours of carnage, the cohort was reduced to more corpses filling the monster's refuse pool. Throughout the fight, the creature would take time to devour soldiers, ripping limbs off screaming warriors and swallowing them with its metallic maw. Now, with the threat dispatched, it set to work consuming the fallen, tearing into human meat like a starving hound. All of this was watched by the sole survivor. Conor Guilliman lay in a pool of blood, and only some of it belonged to him. The creature had seemingly ignored him throughout the fight, only paying enough attention to rip off Conor's arm. To the consul's credit, he had managed to cauterize the wound with his charge blade. Despite his emergency treatment, he was in no fighting shape, especially not against a monster of that size and speed. He could try and run, but it would be futile. Conor knew how fast it could move, so instead, he waited, looking for any sign of weakness or opportunity to exploit. The monster spared him for some reason. Conor swore it would regret that decision. With his little remaining strength, he clutched the antique charge blade held in his remaining hand. After an eternity of disgusting noises as the monster finished eating his subjects, it turned to Conor. Stalking over on its pincer legs, the monster bent down to look into Conor's eyes. The beast's breath was horrid. It was a mix of rotting flesh and industrial chemicals. Conor averted his gaze from its coal-black eyes. He knew only madness lay that way. Still, he tried to strike the monster. He lunged frantically at it with his blade, hoping to pierce the monster's skull. To his horror, a telekinetic grip caught his hand and bent it back, twisting his joint out of place and eliciting a scream from Conor. The consul realized the monster could have killed all his men through warpcraft or xenoscience. It had chosen to rip them to pieces. This was no mere animal. Further proving Conor's point, the monster spoke into his mind. Like grating steel, it scraped along his psyche. I am Korban, the Eversacrifice, chosen prophet of chaos. You wear the symbol of an old enemy, mortal. Who are you? As it said this, a single long talon tapped the inverted Omega insignia of Ultramar on Conor's chest. The acid fire that coated its claws marred the blue symbol and started to burn through the outer layer of Conor's armor. Marshalling his courage, the mortal man answered, I am Conor Guilliman, first consul of Ultramar. Kill me and be done with it, fiend. May the gods have mercy upon my soul. The monster responded with a deep, hellish laugh. Its titanic hand gripped Conor and lifted him high. The Ever-Chosen thrust its words into Conor's mind once again. The gods are many things, mortal. Merciful is not one of them. In another time and place, you would be instrumental in the birth of a mighty kingdom. 500 worlds united under order and prosperity. Ruled by your adopted son, carrying your name and virtues for more than 10,000 years. Right here and now, you are just another sacrifice. With those terrible words, Korban opened his cast iron jaws and sank his fangs into Conor. The consul died screaming and weeping as the monster devoured him whole. When all that remained of the noble citizen of Macragge was a pile of bone and armor, Korban turned its attention to the world he had crashed on. By the god's will, he had been spat from the warp in Macragge's orbit. It had taken every ounce of his psychic power and dark blessings to survive impact. The valley of Lapinis had fed him well, the meat and misery of its fauna resorting him slowly but surely. His body had regrown in new twisted manners, his distant humanity as Argel Tal long discarded. Now the souls of Connor and his minions empowered him further. The memories and torment belonging to his meals gave him new strength and wisdom. The war between the gods had stirred the warp to unfathomable degrees. The Astronomicon still burned strong, powerful enough to stop the schemes of the Four from materializing anywhere its light touched. But out here, in the Ultima Segmentum, at the edges of its influences, the storm drowned it out. Macragge, the 500 worlds, and countless other planets at the galactic fringe were isolated like islands in a hurricane. They made for easy prey for those touched by the divine. Korban now knew why the gods had cast him here, on damned Macragge. The anathema was building an empire. Korban would do the same.